liberating people.
You know, like I get compliments from like my wife and people when I dress. Oh, you look so nice. I don't think I look nice. I think I look like a 12-year-old in a borrowed suit from his dad. I don't have the height or the stature for it, and because I'm kind of a short person, like whenever I wear like a dress shirt with a pocket, it's always like this oversized pouch that's like going down the side of my chest. And so, yeah. So plus I just prefer to be comfortable.
I agree. I agree.
It's enough that I have to leave my house.
And take the train, goddammit. Right? Or drive down.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, seriously, and I don't know how people wear these like custom fit suits. Like they look like they're tight on them. Like they look clean.
Fit suit is not tight.
I've never had one. So
I have a friend who wears them. I wouldn't know. All my suits come from the retail shop.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can get the pants and the jacket and the coat for $35 less.
Hey, I mean,
I didn't know.
Like I said, I mean, even at least for our field, a lot of employers also come dressed down. So like, if you go too overdressed, they kind of are like, come on, like be in your field. You're not coming for a finance job or something.
I mean, I'm always amazed when I go to like academic conferences in the summertime, and there's still dudes like all buttoned down. They're like younger than me. And
oh
like,
wow.
Dude, come on.
Wow.
We're going to the bar literally after all of this is done.
Right. Those people should be like breaking down that whole stigma.
I don't consider myself to be breaking any stigma down by dressing like a slob. That's just who I am.
You're wearing clothing.
I'm wearing clothing. That's
right.
That's
my
right.
point. That's what I'm saying. You're
dressed. Could be worse.
You are dressed. And appropriate.
And it's clean.
It's clean and appropriate.
No.
It's
appropriate.
appropriate.
We have to check on the whole situation.
No visible.
My favorite pair of summer khaki shorts, and my wallet has just worn like a giant hole in the back of it, and I keep forgetting I put the wallet in there. What is? I come by that by story of my family. My dad had this ugly pair of pants in the 1970s, like some kind of horrible plaid numbers. And my mom hated him so much, and so my grandmother told her, my dad's mom said, just cut the legs out of him. So my dad had laid him out, went to go take a shower, whatever, came back and picked up his pants, and the legs stayed on the bed. Yeah.
I hate it. My mom does that. I hate it. She's like, my clothes will magically disappear. I'm like, but I've worn those in.
Yeah.
But they're gone.
All right. Uh-huh.
When she gave me, it was a bow tie, one of those pocket hankies. Never going to be used. Ever.
There may be some dress like costume events.
I hate bow ties. That's full long.
Really? I would prefer bow ties. They at least look cooler to me.
Oh, really?
It's a little. Also, it's unique. Like I like
True.
Unique things. Like everybody's wearing a tie.
Pocket hanky. Who does that nowadays?
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
Like if you go into Macy's or something, like they have a whole section, like a whole suit section.
Sportscasters always love it. They always love Mark Jean Greco.
Yeah. But the people there are very knowledgeable. I've been there, and they're like, they can look you up and down and tell you, like, this is your pants size, this is your whatever, here, just get you wear this, they give you this.
Right.
And I'm like, thank you. Okay, perfect.
If you want crazy male attire, my husband's Scottish, so he has a full kilt.
Oh, that's awesome.
And everything, so going to weddings, it takes him twice as long to dress as I do.
Oh, I'll bet.
Because it's the sock garters, the siganda, the handkerchief.
Is he on the back side too with it?
He doesn't hear the back.
Okay.
But outside weddings are bad in kilts. If a bee goes up your
business, yeah.
He was a best man at the wedding, and like during the rehearsal, it started dancing. Like,
I mean, he can close that up, right? Like women have stuff that close, like when they wear dresses, they wear, so like he could wear the same thing. Don't they have those for men? Like something to close it up or something?
A true Scotsman.
No, I
Yeah.
think true Scotsman.
Yeah. We're gonna be authentic. All right.
I will risk the beat.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for not playing hooky on like the most gorgeous day we've had yet this summer. So we'll kick off things with
Tuesday morning Q&A and see how long it goes. I want to walk through that GitHub Ruby style guide, which is actually a style guide that accompanies like a linter tool they have called RuboCop. Then we'll go through project 1. I couldn't figure out where to stick this thing, but I wanted to make sure we actually did it today, so I stuck it there. Then we will do the 10-cent tour of Rails, and we'll kind of look at the Rails command. And somewhere, I don't know where this is going to land exactly, but I want to talk about configuring your editor for Git commit messages, and we'll use Atom as an example. Atom continues its march into my life, and now like I don't want to write commit messages ever again unless it's in Atom for reasons that I'll show you. And then we'll talk about using Git to understand what different Rails commands are doing, because that's Rails, as we will see, is a sprawling behemoth. And that's just your app. Like that's not even the Rails gem, but like even what it creates for you is huge. So one of the best ways to sort of stay on top of all that is to use Git to your advantage. And then, of course, for as long as you're in this class or beyond this class and you're doing Rails stuff and you want help from me, I will show you how to craft a real good commit message so I can look at it and hopefully help you track down what's going on. Wednesday may change because I might find myself digging into some of this stuff, but we'll do kind of more full-on theory and application of model view controller architecture. We'll look a little bit more at agile development techniques, although some of this is going to necessarily just come up today. This will probably come up today too, do a little bit more with gem files and bundler and semantic versioning, and particularly the syntax to use in bundler so that you can use semantic versioning to your advantage. We'll also talk about the 3 different environments that ship with Rails and talk about what they're for. And then I'll talk a little bit about Rails community history and culture and sort of open source practices generally, stuff that was on the calendar last week but we just didn't get to. So, are there questions? Things from last week, things from the reading?
I asked all my questions on Basecamp.
Okay.
I have a question about the blocks and the procs.
Yes. That's an intense chapter.
So I'm 118.
What happened to my copy? Hold on, I want to pull this up. So go ahead. It's page 118, and then of course, if you can give me a phrase. Hold on a second. Let me just. Hang on, I'm digging around here for my. I've given a lot of money to pragmatic programmers over the years. Let's see, where is it? Learn to program P5. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so the procs and blocks chapter, that's like right at the end, isn't it? Yeah, it's the last chapter. Okay.
Keep going. Unless somebody has questions at the beginning of it. Yeah.
Well, where are we?
Yep, we're going towards
Giving me.
passing blocks into methods. Yep.
There we go. Okay.
So we have to class it right. So basically, here it says, was a block now a proc? So and then you can do the call on it. So
right.
Assuming that implicitly pass a block that we passed into a proc.
A proc and a block are the same thing. Okay. Yeah. There is the distinction is this. Okay, so let's hop into Herb here and look at these two things. So if we go into Herb and we do my array and we do just our shorthand catfish dog, right? We can do an iterator, which is where we usually see blocks. So we do my array each do animal, right? And then we can put animal and end, right? So this, technically what the block is that little thing there, where we're saying puts animal, okay? Now, when we call a block like this is an ad hoc kind of thing. We can write any code we want there, and we run at that time, whenever that thing happens to be called, and that's it, all right? Versus, and let me keep this syntax real close to the book. So here, where does he call this? Okay, so he's referring to this object here. Okay, and here he's actually calling the proc directly. So the proc we could actually go like here where he's got this square at one. So we could do let's see, what do we want to do?
Well, I'm just trying to understand because we pass in a do and an end, which is a block, right? Instead of creating a proc object. So I guess does that block get implicitly like behind the scenes? Does it initialize a proc object? I guess my question, because the call method, my understanding was on the proc object.
Right.
Because I was reading block itself is not an object.
Yes.
Online. So
Right.
It's just a thing or syntactic sugar.
Right, you're absolutely correct. So that's this special variable syntax here where we're using this ampersand. Mm-hmm. Part of it, I think, is like I get turned around just on the name of the variable that he's got here for this thing, right? So yes, so this is just saying that for this each even method is expecting to receive a block as an argument. Okay. All right? So, and then yes, so when we have a new proc object, it has a method called call, which just says, go ahead and call this block/proc. Okay. A block is like a freestanding code. A proc is some object that we've created that has some arbitrary collection of code in it. Okay. The good news, if this chapter gave you hives, is that we probably won't be doing a whole lot with procs in Rails. Most of the iterators and stuff that we would create for that kind of thing are basically there. But it's good to understand what this is so that if you're looking at the documentation, you come across a variable that opens with an ampersand, you know that this particular method expects somewhere along the chain a proc or a block to be passed to it. What happens here is, so when he actually runs this thing right below, all right, so here he is calling each even, right? So again, this is a freestanding, I don't know why that keeps popping up. So this is a freestanding block. But when it gets slurped up as an argument into the method, it becomes a proc. Okay? So you could almost think about this. So you saw the syntax on the other page, which was, proc new. So you can almost think about if you just call a method that expects a block, like that each even one, this is almost like the literal constructor for a block, whereas a proc is where we do the whole calling proc new, saying this is the piece of code that we want to reuse again and again and again. Does that make a little more sense?
Are functions not first-class values here?
You can't pass a method. That's part of the reason that blocks are useful. So you can't pass a method into a function as an argument. Versus a language like JavaScript where you do that all the time. And of course, JavaScript is completely happy to return functions from another function.
Okay. So why do they label Ruby as a functional programming language? Isn't the first goal of a functional programming language to be able to pass functions?
I don't think it is a functional program. It's an object-oriented programming language.
Well, Wikipedia is my source.
Well, if it's on Wikipedia, it must be true. Wikipedia, I think, claims that you can do functional paradigm in Ruby, but as I told you the first day when we were going over the course description, I was saying I can show you some of the functionalish things, but it's just Ruby has a very strong point of view, a very religious orientation towards the object-oriented paradigm, so trying to do functional style programming in Ruby just doesn't work. Because again, even if we do something, like this, where we say what looks like the closest thing we have to functional programming, right? We can define a method like say hello, and we can put hello, right? That's as close as we can come to writing, and let me blow this up a little bit, what would be more or less functional programming. But it's a myth because you're inside of this main object, right? You're still doing object-oriented things. So if you want to do functional programming, you're better off in a language like JavaScript that has a better tooling that lets you do that kind of thing, right, versus Ruby.
On the recursion chapter?
Yes. Do you have like a key phrase I can type in?
Search for continent _size. Yeah, I
have no idea what
I need to go over that's why I'm asking, because I didn't understand first, what does it mean to figure out a continent size?
Oh, continent.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a goofball little Yeah. Although sometimes I assign this book, it seems like he completely irritated me with his sense of humor. Right? Let's see.
It's kept it entertaining, I'll say that, because the material's dense.
Okay. So yeah, so he's... Recursive functions, again, they tend to be more of the academic variety. The example, if you want to understand how most people think about recursion, the factorial example on the preceding page, that's a much more typical use of or example for recursion, right? But in terms of understanding what this continent example is, so the first thing is to be, if you type this example out, is to make sure you assign your variables to a value there, otherwise you're going to get a whole bunch of like missing method kind of thing, right? So he's creating this world, which is just a two-dimensional array, right? Do we know two-dimensional arrays? It's an array of other arrays. So he's trying to basically do like a plain text map here. And what he wants to do is kind of go through this map and count all the places that are land, and the way that he's doing it is to check, and again, I am a huge fan of pictures, right? So any point on this map, right? So we have an x and a y coordinate here on the block that we're currently interested in. If we go up, that's x, y plus 1. If we go down, it's x, y minus 1, right? And then, of course, we can go over here. This is x and y minus 1. This is x and y plus 1. And then, of course, we can do x. Well, let's just go ahead and do it. So we're going x plus 1, y minus 1, x minus 1, y minus 1. Right? So that's how we sort of map out from any given point whether we're finding lab. No, y-axis, well, we're going down here. Right? Although this one should be, this I screwed up. I'm not going y. This should be, this is x minus 1, x plus 1, and y. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah, that's x. Okay, x minus 1, y plus 1, x plus 1, y plus 1, like that. Okay, so these, count them, 8, right? 3, 6, 8. From any point on the map, we can look at the adjacent squares, figure out, is it water or is it land, right? And he does the thing recursively, right? So we're doing continent-sized world, x and y are the two, or well, world is the array, and then our x and y are our starting points in there, right? And then we're saying if the place at that particular coordinate is not land, right? So either it's water, which is what we set it at, or we see that once we have counted land, we actually set the value in the array to counted land. Okay, so then you won't get a double count on that thing. All right? But if it's not land, we return 0, which means we're not going to add any kind of size to our world or to our count of how big the world is. Otherwise, we set our size equal to 1. We do our counted land. And then here's where we're doing the recursion, right? So we're calling this continent size. We're passing in the same world array that we did originally. And now we're doing x minus 1, y minus 1. This is why a picture like this, even though I screwed it up the first time I drew it, to me is really helpful because I can't look at that and be like, oh, yes, they're traversing all over the map, like how patently obvious that is, right? So here we can actually see how we send these things out at any given point, and then it recurses until finally the end result is once everything has been counted, instead of having O and M all over our world, we'll have counted land, counted land, counted land, counted land, right? So you could even do like world.inspect, right? Somewhere in this book was that inspect method. Very handy, right? You basically get inspect every time you use herb, right? That's where, when we run these things and we get this return, it's basically taking whatever is returned and running inspect on it so that you can see, oh, okay, yes, this is an array, and that's what's going on in there. Although note the slight fundamental difference. What is the difference? So here's where we actually ran through that block. It returns the last thing it evaluated, which is the array that we called on. What's the difference between this, which herb returned, and this which inspect returned. Right? Does everybody see that? Nice and dark. Let me turn the lights off. Right? So we're getting a string here. Okay, so when we call inspect, it is going to return a string version of whatever it is that we're inspecting.
How did he end up with 23 is what I actually didn't understand. Like, what is he counting and what happened? There's more than 23 M's, if that's what he's counting.
Is there? I've never taken the time to actually count by hand what there is on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Yeah, that's weird, huh? There must be some, because that should match the same thing. There's nothing in this.
Yeah, I tried to look for maybe a continent that's not separated by 2 or more waters type thing, but I didn't find a group of 23 together.
Oh, well, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to determine the entire size of land in this entire world, which is part of the problem with calling continent, because we usually think of a continent like North America, Asia, like it's contiguous, right?
But I guess maybe it's a mistake, do you think?
I would guess so. Let me make a note. I'm gonna, not right now in front of you, but I will take this code home and double check it one more time.
I actually wrote it up.
You wrote it up?
Yeah, I wrote it up and then I ran it and then kind of walked through that picture to understand for myself, and then I still didn't understand how 23 came about. But yeah, it'd be great if you could check.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that could be some holdover from this.
Unless like the problem statement is something that we're missing, that we're trying to find X and then that is 23. My understanding was he's trying to find all the M pieces in the map.
Right. Yeah, all the land in the map. Yeah, I'll go do that. So let me just put this in my to-do list on my app. But do we understand, so the basic thing about recursion is that you recurse when you basically have the same problem where trying to solve one small piece of the problem looks like the way that you solve the entire problem, right? So that's why factorial makes a lot of sense. 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, right? N times n minus 1 is the recurring problem all over the place. Now, the big reason that people tend to, except for specialized problems like this, they tend to avoid recursion because that's a very easy way to blow your stack and swallow up all your memory, right? You could do that very easy in JavaScript, right, which does not have nearly as good of memory management as Ruby does. So you just get, you're recursing 100,000, 10,000 levels deep or something like that, and you literally run out of memory to keep track of everything that you've recursed so far. All right.
I'm using one of the exercises, but recursion, it's just easier to use a loop and make more sense.
Mm-hmm. And that's the way that a lot of people would do that. But for the sake of completeness and seeing how you would recurse in an object-oriented language, right? Because again, functional programming makes a lot more sense in terms of recursion because you're just calling the same function. Here we're calling the same method within the method. All right. Check land count function, 23 question mark. Yeah, Tarun, if you want to post your demo repo to the Blackboard, or not, oh my God, Basecamp. So that we can, yeah, right. That's right. Oh, I'm a closeted Blackboard fan. All these years I've been living a lie.
I had a question about the classes and the class.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, every class is an object. Here it said, right? That's why you can call like methods on it.
Right.
That means they're initialized, right? The class itself is initialized. So how do you get to like the first object? Like how do you initialize the first ever, like the base, like you know you showed us ancestors, you had the base object, like how does that get initialized? Like who would initialize that?
You generally would not initialize that. What you would do, if anything, is that you would create, so what you would do is we would do class super basic would inherit from basic object.
Okay.
Right? And then we can do super basic class, and can we do super class here? No. Super basic super class. That gives us basic object. Right? Whereas most other things, if we call string, super class, we're going to see a more complex, and it goes back to object. Now, if we go super class, we should see that object itself inherits from basic object. But you can skip all of those methods that are included with the object class by inheriting directly from the basic object. Okay?
Yeah, so that's obviously
Right. Right. And again, we can look at the documentation. Let's do that. I'm always preaching the gospel of look at the damn documentation and then never do it, right? So here we go, devdocs.io. Yes, let's do that. So I might have cleared this stuff up. You are a big fan of devdocs? Good. Good, good. And of course, you'll notice, let's go ahead and do this right now while we're here, Ruby on Rails, right? So you can install the Rails documentation this way as well. But let's go and look for basic object.
Quick thing, my friend who programs for IBM in Java,
Mm-hmm.
told this to him, he now loves it.
DevDocs? Yeah. I know. I've just started using it in the last few months because I used to use, and still do most of the time, I use a program called Dash, which is the same thing, yeah, and it's been removed from the App Store, and it's all sad. There's a way that you can get the thing, but you can't beat like a native browser-based app. We should look and see if there's a way to donate, because I would totally like PayPal these people some money to keep this thing going, right? So, yeah, and so here you can see, just in the example, so to avoid polluting basic object for other users, then we just subclass whatever class it is that we want to inherit from a basic object. Right, and we can see that it's new. It has the new method, right? We can tell whether it's true or false. Right, we have our object ID and all of that. So, to use RI for an example, right, we could do, if I exit out of here, we could do RI basic object new. Okay, nothing known about new, because it's such a boring method, right? So can we do equal? Why not?
What is
RI stands for, ooh, here we go. No match is found. Yeah, but what does it stand for? I'm not quizzing you. I'm embarrassed that I myself can't think about what it is.
I totally looked it up and then I forgot. Oh yeah.
Ruby index. Yeah.
Reference front end.
Right. And again, we probably wouldn't look up basic objects methods with this, but we could do things like RI array each. And now this will give us some basic command line documentation. Hey, TK. This will give us some basic documentation. Will tell us about calling it. Here we call it with a block. Right? Otherwise, we get back a simple enumerator from that. Okay? So these are very short pages, and so they can be a quick way to look everything up. And better still, this is all installed with Ruby or whatever, so all you have to do is call RI. You've got it. You don't have to have an internet connection or anything like that. But, of course, if we go to something like devdocs and we look for array each, right, we'll get a much nicer, fuller set of documentation on this particular thing.
This is life-changing.
It's even more life-changing when you go out of internet range or you're on an airplane and don't want to pay their felonious Wi-Fi fee and you've still got your documentation. That's awesome. What's that? Because you're programming Ruby. Yeah, you're.
If you want to become a Ruby salon.
And to me, TK, yeah, it's probably improbable that I'm going to be like hacking serious Ruby on the plane. But to me, that becomes sort of like the standard for things. Can I do this thing without an internet connection? Because you just never know when you're going to end up in a situation like that, right? Say it again. Yeah, sure. You got a big presentation or something, and something gets screwed up? Yeah, right. Oh, there you go. Screw this. Yeah, right. I can't pay for airplane Wi-Fi. Nice. Yeah. Or Ruby index. I saw that as well. Yeah, yeah. So again, that's documentation of probably last resort or just a quick refresh, right? Or if you're just literally that lazy, you can't be bothered to get away from your command line to open up a browser, you can always just call up RI, right? And this is important too, right? This particular notation, when you see that octothorpe, right? That's the fancy typographer's term for a hash. That what we're talking about when we see this is we're talking about some kind of class and some kind of method that's all on it. Okay?
So what does it mean we have double semicolons?
What does it mean when we have double semicolons? So remember, let me just, right? Right. Yeah, exactly. So if we do module awesome, class super cool, and right, we would get at our, we could do awesome, super cool, new, right? So this double colon operator usually means that we're working with a module and then a class defined inside of that, although it would work the exact same way if we had a class that itself had a class defined inside of it. Okay? That's the syntax. And again, it's common to see this kind of thing because we want to scope, right? Rather than having a very common, not that super cool is a common name for a class, but if we had a class like car, we had a class like PDF, or a class like, something that reasonably might appear in another library, if we use module, then we can limit the amount of collisions with those things. Okay, we haven't initialized method on that, so it won't let us play nice. Gesundheit. The class. So this was one of the... Did that part speak to you? Okay. And again, right, a class in Ruby is just another object, right? So we can do a string literal. We'll do a very literal string literal by creating a string literal called string literal, and we can ask for what its class is, right? And we can keep chaining this thing, so we can say string literal, what's your class's class? And we should get class, right? And I think this will work ad infinitum, right? And we just keep asking what's the class of class of class of class. It's always going to be a class. So that's why we jump in, right? 2 back here, we can do superclass. So class inherits from module, right? Which is an important point, right? Because remember, what's our primary distinction between a module and a class in terms of making baby objects? Right. Instances of module do not respond to a new, or do not come into the world from a class method called new. Yes. And that's where we get our mix-ins, where we create some set of methods in a module. We can call those methods directly from the module, or we can do a mix-in by running that include awesome module or whatever it is. Well, it depends. If we're, let's create one, right? We can do, awesome, puts, yeah, right? All right, everything is awesome, boink, boink. So if we want to, we could call awesome, so awesome. Oh, that's not true. Okay, maybe we can't call it directly. I thought we could call that directly. Maybe I'm forgetting the syntax here somehow. You know what? You're probably right with the dot. No, it doesn't like that. So if we create class Lego, include awesome, right? So we can do my Lego. Oh, that's right. We still need to have a. All right, let's open it back up. Class Lego def initialize.
How does it handle appending with appends? Is that what it does? Like when you open something? Keeps the current content.
Right.
You fed in and then append.
Right. And so you can just open it up and start writing or rewriting methods, right? And this little symbol indicator, right? These things have to be unique within a class, right? So if we start rewriting that particular method, then it will take that new redefined version.
Is module itself an object or no?
Module is a class, and yes, so therefore it is a. Why? What is wrong with my object-oriented Tuesday morning disaster here? What am I doing wrong? Come on, Carl, get it together here. Right, I just want a new instance of it. Response to true. Oh, this is interesting. This error is actually coming from Bryce. Okay, but there should be, because we've included this awesome module. Come on, Carl. I just did this last week where we had a module and we did the methods from it. Although now I'm starting to worry about my, right? Right? Fancy herb. Ruining my life here. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, but then colon to what? Like. No, I don't know what is going on. All right. When all else fails, good old Google. Okay, that's for when we've got a separate module, but come on.
I think the first one on Google without
Oh, okay. So part of the problem is how I'm creating. That's right. So if we want to call a module method directly, we have to do self. So awesome, right? What's this actually is awesome. Oop. Right, def. Ugh. All right. One more time with feeling. Module. Awesome. Def. Self. So awesome. Puts. This is so not awesome. Okay. All right. So now we should be able to call awesome. So awesome. right? Okay. Because there, when we're using self, we're creating a class method versus regular def so awesome, which would be an instance method. Okay, that's the distinction.
So that means module, because you can't initialize a module, you can only have class methods.
No, well, if you want to be able to call a class method out of the context of an instance of an object, then yes, you would have class methods in a module. But you should be able to create instance methods within a module, require those in your class, and then you're able to call those instance methods, but only from the instance of an object that inherits that that mixes in that particular module.
Not directly in module, you couldn't have variables and say off and right?
Well, I think we did that last week, didn't we? Let's go to the demos directory. I feel like we're going back over some. We did that on 524.
Very powerful in understanding.
Yeah, no. Right, remember? So yeah, so we did do this last week with our... We did do this last week where we created a module called vehicle. Here was this accelerate instance method, right? And that was the question. Remember, we talked about this. Can you just start naming instance variables inside of a module when it's unclear as to where those things come from? And what we determined was when we pulled in this class car, look, it's the same crappy syntax as I was trying to use this morning. Include our module. I have no idea what was going on that wasn't working, but we added our accessors, right? And then we were able to do things like brake and accelerate, things like that.
But in this case, you only able to do car.new. You weren't able to do vehicle, right?
That's right. Right, let's do it. Let's load this thing up. Herb. And we'll do load. Right, so we can do car class. Oh, this is a module, so car does not exist outside of the vehicle module. So we can do vehicle car class, right? That's a class, right? So we can do Toyota. I've got JavaScript on the brain this morning. I keep wanting to type var in front of all the variables, right? Toyota vehicle car dot new Toyota, right? And now, of course, once we have that instance like this, we can call break, right? And it will tell us that we're stopped from a module, right? So that's the case where we're calling this particular instance method. Are you okay, TK? It's cold. Okay. No, it's okay. Other questions? Mm-hmm. The issue was something going on with Herb that I wasn't able to initialize and require my module the way I wanted to. Yeah, Bryce was messing me up. I'm going to find out what that's going on. That's part of the problem when I am prepping for class and doing all kinds of weird things, and I think I've set it all back to normal. I haven't. TK, did you have any questions from the reading or anything over the weekend before we proceed further into Rails? Mm-hmm. Huh. Yeah, we saw that you had some load errors on Basecamp. Let's see what we got. Okay, so it's not, so no such file or directory. So part of it, yeah, right now you're in your home directory.
Okay.
So you need to go to wherever that calc.rb file lives, right? Which I'm guessing is probably not here. Yeah. See if I type ls. So Ruby, when you call the Ruby program from the command line, it expects ultimately some file.rb, but if you're not in the same directory as file.rb, then you need to do path to file.rb, right? Oh.
Explain it kind of like compiling Java, right? It could be. I mean,
what if we actually, when we call upon Ruby from the command line, what is this thing? What's that? Well, it's a binary. Okay, so that's a super abstraction, but what particular binary are we calling, right? If I call Ruby module.rb, yeah, it's the interpreter, right? That's what we're calling. So we're saying, hey, Ruby, so TK, you see, here I'm in this directory that has a module.rb file. Okay? Now, if I jump back a directory and say Ruby module RB, I will get the same load error that you were, right? So it matters where you are on your file system when you call Ruby, which makes sense because if you could just call Ruby randomfile.rb anywhere, then you would be only allowed to have one file named module or one file named car or whatever anywhere on your file system. Okay? Sure?
We're going to see that right now.
Just Ruby-V.
Right, and then, yeah, you always want to do the version there and check to make sure. Good. And you're getting 2.4.1 and good. Yeah.
This is a short question. So we can pass multiple variables into a method. You just have to separate them with commas.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if we do,
So
yeah, we could do def multiple methods, or rather not multiple methods, multiple arguments. We could do argument 1. Don't ever do variables like this. I'll cry. Right. Argument 1, argument 2. Yeah. Puts dear God. Okay. Right. So then we've got our multiple arguments there. Now, what I was saying to you, Dean, was that we could do arguments from hash, and then we could do a hash, right? And then we could start somehow, do, key variable, and then we could run through whatever options hash gets passed in, because that's what people tend to do. If you have a very complex method, not even necessarily for initializing something, but if you just have a lot of different things that you want to have changed, or if you want to do defaults, right? Did we talk about that either? Let me just kill this, because I don't want to finish writing that method. Where we do methods that have, so if I did a car make, I could do make is equal to Toyota. Yeah. Right, so if I don't call any arguments on make, the make is a Toyota. Otherwise, I can say Buick like that. No, make is a Buick. So that's a very common pattern. And it actually leads us nicely into the Ruby style guide, if we're ready to move in that direction as we close in on 11 a.m., right? So one of the things in the Ruby style guide is if we're going to do variables that have a default value like this, to put spaces around the equal sign, right? Because if we do make equals Toyota, this looks more like one solid unit. Maybe it's just a very long variable or something, whereas if we have those rivers of space around the equal sign, it's more obvious that, okay, we do have this particular argument here, and it needs to be this particular thing. And of course, if we have multiple variables like year and mileage and what else, color, and you can go nuts, right? This is a case where, and we can create defaults of all of these things, but if we're going to be passing in more than a couple of arguments to a method, it makes more sense to work with an object hash instead. And then we can do all of those defaults inside the method, or we can do it on an instance variable or something with thing, and there's the, where are we, dev docs? Hash merge, right? So this allows us, so here we've got two hashes. So you can imagine H1, that could be our default hash. Like these are the default settings. H2, this is what our user passed in. So what we can do here is run H1 merge H2. So we take H1, which is our set of defaults. We merge in the hash that the user passed to the method, and now we've got this new super hash where we've got the default A is 100, but then B is 254 rather than 200 because that's what the person specified.
Wait. Oh, yeah. It made the decision for you. I don't like that. Just take the second one. Value as opposed to the first one, right?
Well, right. So you would figure out which one takes precedence. If you think you're smarter than your users, then you would do H2, which is whatever the user passed in, merge H1, and then you, as the author of the method, would say, no, my options are way better than yours. But then that kind of defeats the purpose of allowing a user to set custom options, right? So, no, to my mind, this is absolutely expected behavior. That's exactly what it should do. The second thing that's passed in, or the hash that we're passing into our existing hash, or our default hash, that should take precedence. Okay, and of course there's a bang method, right? So this particular, the merge without the bang is just going to return the new hash, whereas if we do it with the bang, we're going to expect that H1 is changed now, okay, which probably would not be what we would want to do. Especially if we're creating other instances and we want that default set. We want to run the risk of borking that stuff. All right, GitHub's Ruby style guide. This is a decent thing. So, just as, in fact, this is a great kind of way to review of everything we've done so far, at least from a style perspective, right? Soft tabs, so we want 2 spaces per tab. Each line of code kept to a readable length. And they're recommending here fewer than 100 characters. I wholly endorse 100 characters. And of course, with Ruby, it's rare to have a line of code that goes out that far anyway. Never leave trailing white space, right? So you can have whatever that module was that we grabbed in Atom that will strip all your trailing white space off. Each file ends with a new line, right? So there should always be a blank line at the end of the file. Now, here's where we get to some meat and bones. So it says use spaces around operators after commas, colons, and semicolons, around and before our braces, right? So all of that looks pretty similar to what we're doing. So we wouldn't want to mush 1 and plus 2 together. We want to leave these spaces in place. We generally leave, I'm sometimes guilty of this because of JavaScript habits, but when we have a comma, we want to leave a space at that. Again, the point of the space, it has nothing, right? We can do, in herb, we can do, let's see. Right, there's nothing wrong with the, or I mean, let's go further. Right? Sum is still 3. That white space is not significant, but in terms of being able to more clearly see, we have a variable called sum that is set equal to this. And these are the 2 things that we're working on. That's what the purpose of the space is there, is to keep the code more readable.
So with you did the add sign and then the curly bracket,
Mm-hmm.
how would the space go for that? I think pushing the curly bracket immediately after the add sign.
At and curly bracket. Oh, you're talking about the little shorthand for doing a
String.
right. So yeah, we could do a double quoted string, right? We can do %Q. I am an awesome string. Oh, can't just say string. We need equal sign. There we go. Right. Now, see, I put these spaces in there. Those became part of the string. Okay. So in that case, our space is significant, so we want to make sure that we close this stuff up so that we get, unless, of course, what we want is a string with trailing and leading white space, that it looks like that. All right? And this is saying no spaces before or after parentheses or braces. No spaces after a negation operator, right? This is a fun one. So we indent when as deep as case, right? So if we've got a case statement here and then we run through a bunch of whens, those should all be lined up. Here we're doing assignment based on case, and we're lining up all the whens underneath there. Now what will make me crazy is, and sometimes if you're using the right linting tool, make your linter crazy, is if you have an odd number of spaces underneath that case. Because, so, let's see if this is odd or not. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is actually a case where these lines are indented by 7 spaces in front of when. But Ruby style is to do your indentations to 2 spaces, right? Yeah, you could bump another space after that case or something so that you keep your linter happy. All right? Okay, now this is where it starts to get into things that like I'm sloppy about, right? So empty lines between any definition statement and to break up a methodological paragraphs, right? So here we've got our initialize options, right? Manipulating the result. Which one, Dean?
I was trying to think we have pound. Right? This is how you access an instance variable. You can put a space. I know. You can put a space in it, yeah. But you need, so there's no space between the pound, I just call it pound symbol, and then the curly bracket, right? No space.
So you're doing, let's see, I don't know if this guide even talks about that. Okay, here, at least if we're assuming they're like Chicago Manual of Style, where you can assume that any example that you see in the Chicago Manual of Style is a good style, right? Here we have, yeah, so here's what Dean's talking about. So this is just a variable. We would assume there would be no difference if that were at name for an instance variable like that, right? So that can always be a good thing to do with these kinds of resources, is even if they don't have an explicit rule, look and see how they write it elsewhere. All right.
What was that double at thing?
Double at, now these, we didn't talk about these. And the reason we didn't talk about these is that the implementation in them is so wonky in Ruby that most self-respecting Rubyists avoid them. So we have an at variable, right? This is an instance variable. There is another thing which is called a class variable, which takes 2 ats in front of them. Okay. The problem is, and this is actually in their style guide, it says avoid the usage of class variables due to their unusual behavior inheritance, right? So here we've got a class of parent, which has a class variable set to the string parent. Now we do this little self-print class variable. We're calling on what we think is the class variable here. Here we're creating a child class that inherits from parent. Here we're setting the class variable to child. But now, get this, this is why people don't use this. Even when you call the parent print class variable, it prints child, not parent. So you can see why nobody, I know, TK, that is the exact right face to make, right? Because we don't, I mean, we can do reflection, we can find out, yes, that there has been a subclass made of this parent, but the idea of a class variable going back up the chain, that's really dangerous, right? Because if somebody just subclasses anything you've written and starts overwriting your class variables, then you've got a nightmare on your hands. So, like they say, avoid it, don't use it. That's why I didn't talk about it. It's just one of those things like, yeah, good to know what that is when you see it, but also know that no self-respecting Rubyist uses those things very often at all. All right, so this says class instance variables should usually be preferred over class variables. So we can just call an instance variable here. We could just do class var as parent, right? That would work more as expected. Okay, singleton methods. We didn't really talk about singleton methods very much. So, do I still have my car? Let's see if I can do exploding car Did I load that? No, I didn't. Let's see. Was that on the 24th? Okay. Verb. Load. Actually, I think I've got everything I need in car.rb. Okay. So I can do exploding car is equal to car new gremlin. Right? That was the famous exploding car in the 70s. Oh, done like my car? Yeah, but I thought I had in my car thing, I was looking for the simpler syntax. Let's see, cat car. Yeah, it's still all got all that stuff in there. All right. No, I'll just include the module one instead. I thought I still had the car class just by itself. All right, so one more time. So load module. Okay. Exploding car is equal to vehicle car new gremlin. Okay. Now I have all of my instance methods like break that I can call, but because this exploding car is special, because it can explode, what I can do is actually create puts boom. Oh, except it helps to spell it correctly, right? XP loading car puts boom. Okay, so now my exploding car can explode. Sloppy typing going on this morning. Right? Boom. So that is what is known as a singleton class or an eigenclass. It's another little, you love the German, right? Eigen. Own. It's a particular thing in Ruby that allows us to actually call on an instance of an object, use that def constructor, and then determine a brand new method on this thing, and now, boom, our exploding car will have that. If we had other instances of car lying around, they could not explode. Only our car that has this singleton class declared on it can explode. Okay? Again, that's another kind of construction that's, especially in a Rails context, not used a whole lot. Although there are cases. All right. So specifically, what do you see about, okay, so yeah, we want to do self method when we're doing singleton methods within a class, right? This construction we will see a lot, right? So we won't, if we want to exchange our, oh, I'll drop the vocab. We have a model in Ruby, okay? Model is a class, so if we're modeling cars, we would have class car. You can set class methods like this, but it's better to use self rather than refer to the name of the class for different reasons. All right? Same thing with this particular syntax. All right, unless we need it. All right. Protected and private. We'll see this stuff. We'll always see private private methods particularly in controllers in Rails. All right. We don't need to read every line of this, but part of it is just to show you. Okay, right. Here's our collections, right, Dean? No spaces. Yes.
Private. So any method below private is private, right? It's just the one immediately below.
All of them below private. So as soon as you declare that private, yeah. All that is private.
And what does that mean exactly?
So yeah, sure. Let's open up our, so if I call private def secret code puts so secret. Okay, so now I've got this secret code method, but because I've declared it as private, I cannot call, right? So, Dean, it's private, but this thing is totally like, oh, it's private, right? So it's not secure. It's not like we can have a secret method. And actually, if we were to use the right construction to create this thing as a block, we can use call and we can hit any method that we want on a private thing. So it's more like bumpers on a bowling lane, right? It doesn't prevent you from completely chucking the bowling ball. It just kind of like bounce, bounce, bounce. Like, no, you really shouldn't call that. So it's not a security thing. It's basically to say, you know what, you really shouldn't call this method directly. There's some public method that handles this. This private method is something that we're doing kind of on the down low, behind the scenes, or it's just a method that we need that's private to the class. The other thing that's important, just from an authorship standpoint with Ruby, is that we will often write private around methods that we are using internally that might change, right? So if I'm like, I don't really know how I want to implement all of this stuff kind of under the hood, set those things up as private methods, because then, to take it back, we can keep adding, right, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5 on our semantic versioning, because all of these private methods are behind the scenes. Those aren't changing. If we have a public method that changes in a breaking way, then we have to go to a major version in semantic versioning, right? So private is more of a courtesy thing. It does not mean that nothing can call that, and it certainly does not mean that it's like somehow secret that nobody will ever be able to discover it, because as we can see right here, Ruby will freak out and spill its guts and tell you, oh, that's a private method. Generally.
So it's guts like that on the web too, or?
Probably not, because we will have different log levels and things like that. We'll see that when we actually fire up Rails and later on when we actually fire up the...
On specifically input to the website, they can make it spell guts as you put it there.
Right, yeah. Generally when you're in production, Rails is just like, oops, something went wrong. And that's all it says. And you can look at the source code, there's nothing in there. Now, if you open up the header that comes back with a broken response, you might find a little bit more information, but not by much. All right. Exceptions, hashes, right? This is a perfectly acceptable syntax to put these things on separate lines. We don't have to go through all of this stuff. Ooh, here's our naming thing, right? This is stuff I told last week. Snake case for methods and variables, camel case just for classes and modules, screaming snake for constants. Names of predicate methods should end in a question mark. Names of potentially dangerous methods, so these are our bang methods, should end with an exclamation mark. And as I believe I also told you this last week, bang methods should only exist if a non-bang method exists. So if we've got merge with an exclamation mark, there should be a merge without an exclamation mark so that we can run that thing non-destructively. Okay. Here's our percent literals. So if we want to create a array of simple strings. Okay, here's our single line strings that require interpolation embedded quotes. So that's a nice shorthand. I always do the capital Q. Right? So here we can just do percent and that, and we get a nice little thing, right? Regular expressions. We haven't talked enough about that, but I expect we'll get there, especially when we start dealing with routes and stuff. What else we got? Requires. We got our strings, right? Don't use string interpolation instead of concatenation, which was the Merriam-Webster word of the day at some point last week. I forget. They made no mention at all about the computer usage of that. This particular style guide, we can look at the commit history on it and see how long it is. What I like about this particular style guide is it takes a lot of conventions that have long been standing in the Ruby community and actually just wrote them all down in one place. So to me, it's very handy to look at that, right? Ooh, this is what I was talking about last week, right? Use underscore for unused block parameters. So if we're running through a hash and we're not going to use the key, then we'll just refer to the key as that underscore as a way of saying we're not going to actually deal with the key in this particular thing, right? So there you go. No, the style in that book is not good. There's a lot of things that I don't like. What's that? Right, explicit returns, yeah. In that particular case, yes, they were, and that's what Dean pointed out, was that yes, you can use those to break out of a loop, but for something simple like that, usually you just want to do assignment within a loop and then just let the variable that you're assigning, let that just return once all the conditions have been met or run. But again, and did you all read the little paragraph at the end of the book where he does all the answers? Or not the answers, but possible answers. He has that whole, let's find it, possible solutions, right? So the first edition, and students did hate this, like they got so mad because I would assign it and there was no, like there was all these few things to try and then there was no answers for it. Right, but he has this great thing, it's like, the answers, there's more than one right answer, of course, many, many more. These aren't math problems, right? If instead of writing a program about orange trees or the minutes in a decade, you were asked to write a poem about them, it would be silly, if not downright harmful, to include the answers, right? There's no answer to how to write a particular poem. There's just however you happen to write it. And to me, that's when I know, when I'm working with a language, if I see a particular construction or a particular syntax or even a particular style and I disagree with it, that's when I know that I'm like getting more deep on the level of understanding the language, when I start to develop particular preferences. That said, I love things like style guides. I love documentation. I love Ruby and Rails in particular. Like, to me, Rails owns how style is kind of an arbiter for doing things. If the Rails project in the Rails core, if they structure a block a particular way or if they use a particular kind of syntax, then that's probably a really good practice, right? So that's how we do that. Okay, why don't we take a break now? We can come back at like 20 after-ish, and we'll start with the Rails tour. Oh, wait, no. Let's not take a break. Sorry, person in the room, we're not going to take a break. Not just yet. Let's do the Alpha app project description first, and then we can come back and just get started right on Rails. Okay, so this is our first project. This is the Alpha app. This is due not this coming Sunday, but Sunday in 2 weeks, so this is soon, even though June 11th kind of sounds to my ears like it's far away. It's not. All right, so the project description, this is our Alpha app. So you will independently conceive, sketch, and build the alpha version of a Rails app. So do we know this in software development? What is the difference? Most people have heard of beta versions, but maybe not, and alpha versions. What do we expect of alpha, beta, and then what comes after beta? Production or public release, usually. Right? And just in terms of semantic version, you usually see alphas get a 001, betas might get a 101, and then once we've got public releases, then we go there. Not necessarily, but... And those aren't quite semantically versioned either. Alpha software, what are our expectations of alpha software?
Buggy.
Okay, it's going to be buggy, right? This is a rough sketch. This is a, here's what I'm kind of going for kind of thing, so we don't expect flawless code. We don't expect this thing to be necessarily super stable. Okay? Anything else about alpha code? Is it feature complete? No, right? Right. Say it louder, Dean.
Minimum viable product.
Right, MVP, minimum viable product. Like, this is the thing that has to be there in order for this to even remotely point at the idea that we have. Maybe I'll try to stick this on the reading list for this week since I'm not done mucking with that. 37 Signals talks about the parable of the hot dog. Remember this, Dean, from maybe another class? So, in one of their books, I can't remember which one it is, but it talks about how you might get it in your head that you want to be a hot dog vendor, right? And so you start getting really excited about like the fancy cart you could have to push around and the pretty wax paper you could have to have in your hot dog buns and all the relishes and things like that you could have. All these sort of distractions you can get excited about. But bottom line is if you don't have this piece of meat, you are not in the hot dog business, right? So your alpha, your minimum viable product is about having the hot dog, right? If you don't have a hot dog to sell, you are not in the hot dog business. Doesn't matter how many relishes you have, doesn't matter what the fancy paper is, colorful umbrella, built-in speakers for music, for things like that, right? So And we'll talk about this with scoping, right? How do we scope out a minimum viable product? And I will try to illustrate that in the 10-cent tour of Rails today, where we try to be ruthless about what do we actually really need for this first alpha version. Okay? The app can be anything you believe to be interesting and useful. I got to start thinking about what I'm going to build, because I want to work and build an app along with you guys. All right? It should have only the most basic functionality, right? Our minimum viable product, and designed to be viable. Its purpose is largely to help you learn to work with Rails and make mistakes. Okay, this is a training app. It's a learning app. Okay, probably not something you're going to show an employer. Think of it as a proof of concept, both for the app itself and for your own initial skills in Rails development. However, note that for the remaining projects in the class, teams of 2 to 3 students will develop one of the team members' apps further. Team members' app, that should be plural. One of the team members' apps further. All right? That may or may not be true. When you get into groups, you might have a brand new idea, but ideally in my brain. Okay, so the goals for this project. Learn to conceive and sketch the most basic features for a web application. Learn to set up and build a web application with Rails. Duh. Learn to search, navigate, and consult the Rails documentation and Rails guides to solve your own problems. Identify and understand the basic syntax, semantics, and style of the Ruby programming language. One of the things that we're going to have to work hard at is to remember that even when we're in Rails, it's still just Ruby. There's some syntactic sugar that they use in places that can make you forget that, but it's still all just Ruby. And finally, the goal of gaining a foundational understanding of object-oriented programming is achieved through Ruby/Rails. Okay? All right. In terms of the actual work you have to do, your deliverables and milestones will be a functional Rails app that can be racked up and run locally. A GitHub repository for your app. You'll email the link to me, but also post it to Basecamp so we can see each other's work. You'll send me an email containing the project's 2 final deliverables, which is a 4 to 5 sentence self-critique memo of your project and your progress in class to that point, and then the HTTPS link to your project's GitHub repository. Those are the 2 things that you'll send me. And then this won't really figure into your grade, but unless you don't do it. But that week after the thing, so the thing is due Sunday the 11th. So that week of June 12th, I'd like you to clone, rack up, and run other students' apps and give them some comments on Basecamp. Okay?
Is the post hours for Basecamp?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
The GitHub repository of your app, email the link to the instructor, but also post to Basecamp. Okay, I could probably make that a little bit clearer. All right, requirements for the project, so use Ruby 2.4.x, probably 1, but you never know if 2 is going to come out and you want to switch to that. And Rails 5.x. I've been hacking along in 5.1. There's some cool new stuff that I'm going to teach you about when we get there. It mostly has to do with asset pipeline and things like that, so that week will be interesting. Strive for at least 2 database tables associated in some way. And there's this mystery link about database associations. We'll talk about that next week when we get into models more. You will develop a suite of functional and unit tests for your application, so I'll start demonstrating some of that later this week and certainly next. You will have frequent detailed commits to your Git repository. And I'm going to, from the get-go, I will be modeling all of this behavior. So include commands you may have run. So if you run the Rails generate command, drop the command that you actually ran into your commit message. So TK, when you have something that blows up, you'll send me your repository, and I can look and see, oh, you ran this, here was this thing that you spelled wrong, or here's this whatever it was, right? Not that you're ever going to make a mistake, TK, but in the event, unlikely event that you should, that'll help us all hunt down what happened, okay? Your Git repository must contain only the files and commits from this project, and we'll see today how Rails wants to help us maintain Git repositories and does a very nice job of it. All right. You will do development work on a dev branch in Git and then merge only the best functional test passing work over to the master branch. So I'm going to show you some things about branches today too. All right, and your Git requirements. So you'll have a Git repository with frequent commits and meaningful commit messages that accurately reflect each set of changes that you make. I've got another reading, and if you look at my Git usage, which I've been doing for a long time, I tend to write in the past tense. Added, added, added. Sometimes the infinitive, right, splitting. But I've read a compelling case that you should write commit messages using the imperative mood, as though your commit is some magic spell that says, instead of added crufty HTML to Haml, output Haml, we would say add crufty HTML Haml, meaning you fill in the sentence that says, if you apply this commit, you will add crufty HTML Haml, or whatever it is. Okay? I'll try to demonstrate that later. I don't think I'm making myself clear based on the puzzled looks I'm getting from everyone in the room.
No, it makes sense. It's like,
Yeah.
make it happen.
Right, yeah.
So, and when somebody
Make it so.
checks that out, it's like, this is going to happen. Like, make it happen.
Right, instead of talking history, because most of the time I'm using Git, it's for myself, and I'm looking back to see what I did, and so that past tense usage. But I'm coming to see that this other thing. So maybe we should add imperative mood in there. Then you get yourself a little English grammar too. Okay. Use of the command line Git program on your computer. No commits made through the GitHub web interface. This isn't kindergarten. GitHub repository must contain only the files and commits from this project. All right. So that will be the first project. Okay. Not going to change the world. Not going to make something that's going to win design awards. It's just to help you get your sea legs and figure out where things are and how it all stitches together. Any questions about this app? Or this project, rather?
It really doesn't talk about much. I mean, 2 tables, which I'm assuming is going to lead 2 models. It doesn't talk much about anything about you need to have a certain functionality or use case or anything of that nature. The minimum viable product. 1 controller, 1 view, 2 models.
Possibly. Yeah. And I expect that we'll talk about this stuff as we're working, and if I see someone who's clearly needs to be challenging himself more to ruin, I'll make him do that. But otherwise, no. This is more about just getting a handle on this stuff. And even if you've done it before, hopefully we'll do some more. Have you?
Never worked.
Oh, you've never worked with Rails before. Okay, good. So then, good. All right. So then I will try to learn you the right way. All right. I'll learn you. Okay. So now, for real, let's take a break, and we'll come back at like 11:30. All right? And we'll start digging into Rails.
Just had a thought. So is, I heard of, I remember the name, like JSON and JavaScript, is it kind of similar with Rails and Ruby, or are they not?
No, it's more like jQuery to JavaScript,
Yeah.
right? Down to the fact that jQuery kind of has its own API and its own style and things like that. Ruby is a bunch of domain specific ones. I'll be back.
What preempt exercise did you end up doing?
What's that? The file transport.
You did the baby dragon?
Well, I changed it to the dog.
Sure.
To my own. Yeah, nothing. Questionnaire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then we wrote 2 simple case by accurate. You can loop it most of the time, and then you edit. It's not everyone's spot. All loops. What do you do?
What did I do? I did the content matrix one, and then what else did I do? Let's see. I did the block one in the back here, this block one, and then something about reading a file and parsing.
What about you, TK?
I'm just trying to finish the first couple classes. I really just want to do engineering, so it's first, and I'm just trying to go with it. It's kind of cool, so.
That's great. Because I hate having computer issues and then you can't actually work on what the class is doing. It's a pain.
She decided to like crash a couple times, so I was sitting here like, alright, I'm just gonna be late with that. Now it's working, so now I can't get access to the internet.
Louise, but no, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give it a heads up.
And it's summertime. Oh yeah, the later ones are a lot of work. They're a lot of work.
Yeah. I think I spent like 6 hours this weekend.
My entire weekend.
Crawling through this.
My entire weekend was this, and I'm still not done completely.
And last few chapters, I kind of lost. I figured I'll go back and I'll go over and try to.
I was fine until they said you also wanted to do all the examples. When you said that, I'm like, no.
Yeah. That's fine.
I was fine until you said the examples thing. Well, please no.
And then I was working from my office earlier, and I found the online book, and it's like not the full chapter, it's just part of it, and they're merged, like 6 and 7 are merged into the same chapter. So I'm like, oh, this is easy. There's not that many. Then I went back to the book, I'm like, oh, large.
Oh, good. Yeah, there's so many doc sets on there. It's great. All right. For what now? Oh, GratiPay. Nice. I've never used that, but might very well have to pony up some money. Okay. All right, so let's just take a quick look at the calendar here to see what else we got ahead. So obviously we're going to talk about the Rails command. I think I'm going to go backwards. I want to do some Git stuff first. Well, we'll do this configuration part, which actually you don't have to do much of a configuration at all. Well, first of all, as a way of getting at Rails as a command line app, because that's part of what Rails is. When you use Git, Git is a command line suite, right? When we call upon Git and we say something like git status, let's say, we're calling up the Git program, right? And then we're saying, run your status command, all right? And git status does not, in this case, take any arguments. Versus if we did something like git log, we can do -2, which will give us the 2 most recent commits, right? And if you've never worked with Git before, just really quickly, this is what's known as a SHA-1 hash. This is what uniquely identifies all commits. So when you work together in groups, the way that Kelly will be able to make commits, and Dean will be able to make commits, and I'll be able to make commits, and we can all work together, is that they're all identified by these unique things. Now, it is mathematically possible that there could be what's known as a SHA-1 collision, where you make some set of changes different from my set of changes, and somehow through the most improbable chance ever, they end up with the same fit. If that does happen, you'll be able to write an article about it for a mathematics or encryption publication, be world famous for having your first naturally occurring SHA-1 collision. That probably won't happen. Okay? Note that there should always be a name and an email address attached to all of your commits. You'll have your dates, and then we have the, in this case, very brief commit message. Now, if we run git config, we can add 2 hyphens and then global, which means we want to find out about our global configuration or set something with it, and list. So if I do git config global list, mine might be a little bit more complex than yours, but we can see all of these different things. So username is me, and email is that. I would assign all my commits. I've got auto set on the UI. Now, the main part here that I'm about to change to show how you would use it with Atom is I've got my core editor with BBEdit set, or with Git set up to be BBEdit. If we want to, if I go to the language, why is spelling so hard today? Language Git package for Atom, right, which comes installed. You're so funny, TK. Or are you cold? You're still cold too? I always run hot, like I'm sweating up here. So it says you can configure Atom to be your Git editor with the following commands. So we have git config global core editor, and then we pass it the Atom program followed by this wait argument here, which basically just means that we're going to not complete the commit until we've actually closed the file in Atom. So I'm going to just copy this whole thing because why not do an error-free thing? So I'm going to do git config global. I'm going to set the core editor property to Atom wait. And you can do the same thing yourself. Okay? And now if I up arrow through my history and run git config global list again, I'll see that I have changed my core editor from what it was up here, where it was BBEdit, to now Atom. Why can't I see it? There it is. It's just a short line now. Okay? There's tons of stuff you can set on this. Now, to be properly formatted according to Git house style, commit messages should follow the 50-72 rule. Everybody know the 50-72 rule? So the first line of your commit, which is its basically like its subject line, should be 50 characters. When you do git commit -m on the command line like this, this is the subject line. Okay. And for things to display properly across different tool sets, including things like GitHub, your subject line should be limited to 50 characters. Okay. Then you need to have an empty line of space, and then you should keep things to 72 characters when possible. Okay. So, just for the sake of testing this, I'll just do touch, silly file, I'll just go test file .txt. Okay. And so if I run git status, which I've aliased to gits, right, there's this new file, so I can do git add dot, and if I run git status again, it's sitting there on the index waiting to be committed, right? Now, ordinarily, or the way I've been showing you git is we would do something like added dumb text file, right? But what I'm going to do instead is just call the git commit command without arguments. And when I do that, I'm not found, come on. Make sure that my command line tools are installed. Install shell commands. Okay. What? No, you should be able to, because if you do -m, it's expecting to get the commit message on the line as well. Should be able to just do git commit. No, for some reason this wasn't finding atom. There we go. For some reason I must have updated something. Okay, so now this is big boy, big girl, grown-up commit messages, right? So we've got this default thing that Git gives us, which of course is incredibly difficult to read, gray on gray. So, no, go back later. Please enter the commit message for your changes. Line starting with a hash will be ignored, and an empty message aborts the commit. So if I don't want to make this commit, all I have to do is just close my text editor window. And when I come back on the line here, it'll say abort commit due to empty commit message. Okay, so if I do make a mistake, it's not like you have to like go through with it. But I actually do want to make this commit. Okay. And it tells me that I'm on branch master and that I've got the following changes to be committed, which is that I've got this new file. All right. All right. Here's where it gets cool. So remember that subject lines must be limited to 50 characters. Right? Yeah, I'm at 51 here. There's 50, all right? So it will start highlighting this at you if you go beyond that for your subject line. All right? So let's keep this short. We'll say added empty test file. Ah, yes, imperative mood, add empty test file. All right, Tarun's going to be our imperative mood enforcer in the class. I love it. All right, just to demonstrate commit messages. I'm not going to be able to do it. To show long commit. Okay. And then down here we can write entire essay length text that goes on at, and I don't know if you can see this, but there is a little gray bar here that is showing us our 72 character mark. So when we hit it, we just want to hit a hard return. So we've got a nice new number. Length and explains the how and why of our commit. Or more like the what and the why, not necessarily the how. Right? We wouldn't say, I changed this line a lot. No, we want to know what is it that you've changed and why did you do it. Okay? So I do this, I save it in the usual way, and then I can close this. All right? And if I do git log -1, there is my most recent commit. Add a test file to show long commits, and then down here we can write an essay length thing. Okay? And if I push this up to GitHub. To github.com. Forget my name. There we go. ITMD. X13 demos. There's my repository. Here is my latest commit message. I've got these 3 dots here, and so now we can see that my subject line fits how we would expect, and then we get to see the full-on commit here. And of course, if we went to our commits list, we can click on this and see the expanded view. Here's our subject line in nice bold text, and of course that is also going to obey that 50/72 rule, and then we've got our nice short lines of commit message there. Okay? So it's the 50/72 rule. So the nice thing about using, and it's not that you can't configure other editors with similar tools to help you do this. I encourage you to, if you're not using Atom, investigate your editor of choice and see how to go about setting that up so that it will give you similar reminders, so that you don't have to sit there and count how many characters have I written so far. All right? Just like that. Now,
is it necessary to have that paragraph essay?
Like, how detailed should I explain my change? Like, should I say updated operation to be exponent as opposed to?
It's a rhetorical decision, right? If you're just making bits for a project for yourself, you don't necessarily need to write an essay down there, right? If you're making a pull request to a big open source project that's going to be subject to multiple layers of review, then you're going to want to explain what you did and the reasoning behind it. Now, in a true open source setting, you would likely get on a mailing list, get on an IRC chat room or something, discuss your proposed changes first. Like, nobody really wants you to show up and be like, hey, I made this awesome thing, right? A little bit of warning, a little bit of coordination is generally expected. We're going to use this, and I'll show you this in a bit, to track of things that we're doing with Rails. Yeah. I don't know if I had anything more to say. I was going someplace else when you asked me about the essay. Okay. No, I'm not going to go all English teacher and be like, must write a 500 word. Double space times New Roman. All right, so far this semester, and by default on every single GitHub repository that you create, you have a branch called master, right? And if you can visualize this, right, as every Git book in the history of the world does, we have these little circles along a line. These are our commit messages. Now, one of the things that is great about Git is that we can create a branch off of these things. So, for example, here's our latest stable commit. Okay? That's generally what your master branch should be reserved for. This is the very best code, the test passing code, the ready for prime time production code, or at the very least, ready to be turned in as an assignment in ITMD 413 or 513, right? We do our work on branches, and so dev is a very common just kind of working branch. You can also do things like feature branches. So if we were trying to add like a new color scheme, we might have a branch called colors, right? And then you start your own timeline that's completely independent of your master branch, or if we've got changes going on dev, those are independent of each other. This can get ugly and complex very fast. Okay, so generally, you don't want more than 1 or 2 working branches at a time if you're going to keep yourself sane. Because eventually, if the work is good, then we're going to merge these commits onto the end of our master branch. There's another way that we can handle commits from a different branch called rebasing, which is if there are commits that have happened on this branch. With rebase, we take these commits and stick them on the end of our last shared commit, and then replay this work over the top of the changed commits.
I was reading about the 2 workflows that are followed, the merge versus rebase.
Can you explain that again? And then
Sure.
Start very simple first with
Okay.
commit history, I guess. So I know each branch has its own commit history.
Right.
When you make a branch, it copies the commit history from the master
Right.
and has that.
Yeah, so
Because
let's just make a branch up here, right? So I'm on this master branch. I could say git log. Whoop, let's not do the whole thing. Git log -1, right? That will show us the most recent commit that I've made, all right, which is identified by 671 EAA and so on and so forth. Now, the thing that a lot of developers struggle with is if you come from an older content versioning system like CVS or even Subversion, branches are very expensive, meaning that they have a lot of computational overhead, a lot of resources, a lot of possibility for error. In Git, branches are expected. They are part of how you're going to work in an agile way with Git. So to create a branch, there's a couple of different syntaxes that we can do. One is to do just git branch dev. Okay. And now notice I wrote git branch dev and nothing came back. This goes back to that Unix style of command line tool development, whereas if your tool does exactly what you expect it to do, it just does it and it shuts up. It doesn't say, congratulations, created branch dev, right? But if I run git branch without arguments now, I will see that I've got a branch called master, which is both green and has a star by it. So if this didn't clue you in on my particular command line, this tells me that I am on the master branch right now. So if I do git branch dev just like that, that means I'm creating a branch called dev from the point of this particular commit, right? Now, I can delete that branch, git branch ddev, okay? Deleted branch was 671 EAA8, right? Which is the place that we expect that commit to have happened, 671 EAA8. More commonly, at least I should say more commonly the way I like to work. I like to, if I'm creating a branch, I also want to check it out and switch to it. So let's do this one more time. Git branch dev. Okay, so I've recreated this dev branch, and now I can do git checkout dev, and now I'm on the dev branch, just like that. Okay.
I mean on GitHub that you git branch dash B.
Almost. Slightly git checkout. Okay, so here I've git checkout dev. I switched to the dev branch. Now I'm going to check out master, so I'm back on the master branch. And of course, when we're not on a branch that we want to delete, in this case dev, I can say delete that branch. Now, had I made commits on that dev branch that master didn't know about or that some other branch in the repository didn't know about, it would complain to me and say you've got unmerged work. So it will not let you delete a branch if there are commits that other things it doesn't know about. Now, you can force that by doing git branch D, capital D, like my sucky branch, right? If you have something you started and it just isn't going to work out, you can do capital D, that'll delete it. So you didn't have that. Now, the other way to do this, so let's see, what branches do we have right now? Just our master branch. We can do git checkout B dev, and what this will do is that B flag says we want to create a new branch called dev and we want to check it out. Right? So we do this, one fell swoop, switch to a new branch dev. All right? And of course, if you try to run this command again, it should complain at you, fatal, a branch named dev already exists. All right? What were we doing? We're going to talk about this. Okay, so we checked this out. Okay, so these commits are the same. Now, if I made, we can even say this is like the A line of commits, right, on our master branch. So let's say from other branches, I've got commit A1, commit A2, commit A3. Down here on my dev branch, right, so this is A. Now on this branch, I've got commit D for dev 1, D for dev 2, D for dev 3. Now there's two ways that I can get the work from this branch onto master. The first one is to do a merge commit, okay, or just a simple merge, in which case I would check out master. And I haven't done any commits, so we're going to have to fake our way through this. So we would say git merge dev, okay. I can hit return. It's going to tell me that there's nothing there. It's already up to date. Okay? But if we had these three other commits, then what we would have here is after A3, it would just tack on D1, D2, and D3. Right. it's still, well, yeah, because you don't want to lose your other commits here. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So we do a merge commit like that. Now, the other thing that we can do, and the other thing that you're sort of expected to do, if you're working with other people, is you need to update your dev branch and rebase it. So that what effectively happens is you rebase, I don't know how to draw this well. Let's, I don't know, this is the magnified view. Here's our rebase view. So
Question about the
yeah.
merge commit or the merging back in.
Uh-huh.
It'll take
A commits from the dev branch and tag it on top of the commits of the master branch.
Right. A merge just sticks your commits that you're merging in. It just sticks them on the end of wherever your other branch happens to be. Master, it'll stick them on the end.
Not after A. Not where it broke off, right?
Right. It would start D1, D2
Okay.
after A3 up.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what we usually want to do before we do a merge or a pull request, usually on public branches like this, we do merges. We don't do rebases. The reason we don't do rebases on public branches is that when you rebase, you actually change those commit message numbers, which can cause havoc, right? Because suddenly things that Dean and I thought were the same are now different. But while you've been steadily working here, the project has continued to advance. So what we need to do is rebase dev, or rather, we're going to rebase dev with these commits from master. So here's our last shared commit, right? Now we will have A1, A2, what are we at over here? A3, okay? And then we replay our D1, D2, and D3 at the end of that, okay? Which looks like a merge commit, right? We end up with the same thing. These three commits came first, and then ours came after it. The difference is this is less prone to error. If one of these three commits does something different from what we were expecting down here, we will get errors, which is what we should get. It should say, hey, you and Kelly, or you and Dean, or you and Tarun both changed the same file. Let's fix these things. Okay?
So you update the commit history of that.
Instead of
Right.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that dev, that it has the most recent history. So rather than just having dev, the last A commit it knows about, or the last commit from the master branch it knows about, we rebase so that it knows about A3, and then it replays these three commits. And that's the difference. It's not just in a merge commit, these three dev commits just get stuck on the end. Right? This actually rewrites these commits over the top of this new work.
I still don't see how the commit message numbers would change. The SHA
You're saying would change?
It does, because in the case of a rebase, we're playing this work back over the top. Let me just try to do one real quick. I'm going to make X, well, what the hell? Yeah. These, in a merge commit, I drew this so terribly, I'm so embarrassed. Okay. So in a merge commit, I'll do the merge commit here in red. We get D1, D2, and D3. Okay? And these SHA-1s are the same as they were on our dev branch. When we do a merge, right, so let's just do single letter commits. If we have A and F and 9 are the beginnings of our commits here, when we merge them, we'll have A and F and 9 be the beginning of those SHA-1 hashes. Okay, so a merge does not change it. A rebase will say, hey, master, we need to rebase with whatever work you've got that we don't know about down here on dev. And it'll say, okay. So it will bring over these commits, and then it will replay our work on top of there, which means that we might have 6 and E and A, right? That when we do this rebasing, the work stays the same. The hash that identifies them changes because now it's being computed against work that did not exist on this branch when these commits were made.
What's better? I mean, what's better to do?
What's better to do is to frequently rebase from master. So if you and I are working together, master we've agreed upon is where we're going to put our best work. Every time I sit down to work, I should rebase from the master branch. I should check out master, I should fetch it from the remote, and then I should rebase dev. Okay, or actually go to dev and I'll say get rebase master, and it will rebase my work on that dev branch based on the latest and greatest work. The reason is that when I want to submit my work to master, we want to do just a straight up merge commit, right? Because these SHAs are public knowledge now. So we don't want them changing the way we do a rebase on a private branch or semi-private branch.
But the rebase would mess up my communication with Dean. Suppose like I tell him, hey Dean, can you take a look at this commit I'm working on here on dev, and then he goes there, but I rebased when I started working.
Sure.
Now that SHA has changed, I need to tell him the new SHA basically, right?
Well, and that's where you have to be careful about, and this is where so much of version control is not just about the software, but about your communication practices, right? You probably wouldn't show Dean your work until you were pretty darn confident that it was looking good. And of course, the moment that Dean forks or clones your branch, then yeah, you wouldn't want to rebase that anymore either. I'm thinking more of like, this is my private dev branch where I'm doing my own work. I'm not even going to tell anybody about it. But he could say, hey, or you could write him and say, hey, would you check out this particular commit? He could do that, but you would warn him, like, I'm going to rebase from master or whatever, so please don't get to that. All right? Okay.
But tacking it on doesn't change anything, so why not just always tack on? Always do the merge.
For a couple of reasons. One is that if there are changes in the master branch that have an impact on yours, right? Dean wrote some great method, right, that now supersedes some older method that you were working on down here in D. By rebasing the latest and greatest work, you save yourself trouble and embarrassment down the line because you know your 3 commits here are going to work with the latest and greatest work from master. You don't want to go and discover that you've got a conflict or something when you go to do a public pull request, because that makes you look foolish, okay? And it causes other kinds of problems. Odds are, though, what will happen if you do that, somebody will say you need to rebase master and fix your work and resubmit the pull request, okay? So the idea is that we want to have a continuous line of history that's representative of how the project has worked, right? If these 3 commits up here that happen after you forked off of master have been accepted, then your work should build on top of those 3 commits, okay? But you can't just merge from master because then you'd have D1, D2, D3, A1, A2, A3, and then when you go to write it, the history is going to look all janky and weird. So this helps write a nice continuous stream of history, okay? We're way ahead of ourselves. We won't have to worry about this so much until we get to the group project. I did bring it up, and yeah. As long as there's learning going on, I'm okay. Okay.
That makes much more sense now.
Okay.
You can play with it a little
Yeah,
bit.
it took me years to understand exactly what the difference was between rebasing and merging. So I'm happier now than I've ever been with my ability to talk about it. Okay. The reason I went here is I want to talk about a different kind of branch that you can make, which is what's known as an orphan branch. Okay. Usually when we call branch, by default, it will take whatever. When we call branch or we do get checkout B, it will take whatever the latest commit is on the branch you're working on. But we don't have to do that, right? If we look at, I'm going to do my short form here, if I do the last 10 commits, okay? Let's say I decided, you know what, it was at this point, added vehicle module and car class from yesterday. I wish I could go back in time and just reteach the whole class from this point, making better choices as I went. Right? Through.
Another thing before we move on.
Sure.
Here, it's going to take care of the timeline basically, right? So it's going to basically, when we rebase, if A1 and A2 happened before D1 and D2, it would put them there before D1. But
right.
if A1 and A2 happened after D1, then it would be put between D1 and D2, correct? Like it would rebase appropriately based on time, or no?
No, it's not going to. It doesn't care about timestamps or anything like that in terms of rebasing. It's going to take the contents of this branch, and what it's going to do is it's going to say these things have already happened, even though when we started working they hadn't.
Right.
Now we say these things have happened. Replay your code over the top of these things so that we can see a continuous line of development here.
I see.
Okay? So whether you rebase or whether you merge, your commits on your branch end up at the end. The question is are these commits aware of work that was done in these earlier commits?
Yeah, and then what about dependencies?
What if I have, like, these guys, A1, A2, A3, happened after D1 and D2, and they have a dependency on D1 and D2?
Then you got to rewrite your work, right? So let's say at A1 we got rid of some method that your work relies on, right? Gone here. Now suddenly your work is relying on a method that no longer exists. So when you do this, you've got to go back and you've got to rewrite your work for the new method. Okay? The idea here is to keep your work in sync with the rest of the project. Okay? Whereas merge is just going to be like, okay, thanks for the work. We love work, right?
Yeah, so basically it's like every single time you're as good as creating or syncing up your branch, right?
With master.
Right.
Because when we created the branch, it was at point A. Next time we rebase, we're going to be pointing at A3, right?
That's right.
A3, and then D1, D2,
Right.
D3.
When you rebase, it is as though you ran git checkout branch
Yep, at A3.
at A3
Got it.
instead of back here at A.
Got it. Okay.
Okay?
Gotcha.
All right. So one more quick branching thing. So if I decided, so usually when we call git branch, it uses the latest commit at head, which is our tip of our branch. But we can go back in time. If I say, hey, I want to create a branch from this, right? I can do git checkout B, I don't know, vehicle module, and then I can give it 53A79D. So when I check out this branch, it's not going to start from my latest and greatest. It's going to start from here. Right? And if I do git log -1, which gives me just my latest commit, that's as much as it knows about. Okay? The rest of this stuff, it doesn't know about that. Okay? So that can be a way that we can fix work or go back in, and you'll sometimes see this pattern done when, if there's a major security flaw, they'll go back and check out a branch at the point at which it was introduced. But again, if you're rebasing commits, and you have all kinds of crazy things. So, all right. Let's check out master again. Let's look at our crazy menagerie of branches. Okay, so we've got dev and vehicle module. All right, so I'm going to delete these two things again. And branch D, vehicle module. Okay. So now I'm back to just having a master branch. Now, I'm using this demos repository for the class. And so far, I've got a couple of directories with dates on them. And now the silly test file, right? Let's remove this thing. Git rm test file, git commit -m, remove demo test file. Okay? So now I've got these two things. And what I want to do is I want to create a branch called Ruby that you can consult in the future if you want to go back to what we did that first week. All right? And then from here forward, I'm going to start working with Rails. So to keep my repository clean, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a branch called, actually, what the heck? I'm going to start calling these by weeks. So I'm going to do git checkout week 01. Git checkout -b week 01. So now I've got, if you want to see what we did the first week, you can go to GitHub or you can clone this yourself and you can check out the week 1 branch. All right? But what I'm going to create here, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to destroy my master branch, which you almost never want to do, but I'm going to do that because I want the master to be what we're working on currently, and I don't really want to mix up the history of all those Ruby commits with what we're going to be doing starting today in Rails. So I'm going to delete master, and then I'm going to check out an orphan branch, which is a commit all by itself. It has no knowledge of anything else going on in the repository. These are fairly rare, but sometimes you'll see them. For example, if we were creating a repository and we wanted to keep our website on one branch and our actual source code on another branch, we would do an orphan branch like that so that you associate them. You say, this is our website, this is our source code, but you don't have a commit where you deleted all of the stuff in one branch or another. All right? So I've checked out week 1. I'm going to push week 1 up to GitHub. And now I'm going to do git branch D master. Deleted branch master. Again, it's rare in your life to do that, where you just say, we're going to nuke branch master, but that's exactly what we've done. Right, until I do this, git push origin :master. Okay, that little syntax is, I forget exactly the history of it with Git, but this basically, when you have a colon here, it's like, go find this thing and then kill it. Right? So we do git push origin master, and this might actually prevent me from doing that. Yeah, it doesn't want me to do that. No, because it's expecting master to be there. I think I can do git push F origin master, force it. That's still not going to let me do it. Okay, that's all right. I'm still going to do it down here. Or actually, you know what? I can leave it in place. What I'm going to do is I will push F with a fresh master branch. That's what I'm going to do. All right, so if I do git branch right now in this repository, I've got week 1. Right? And the reason I'm going through all this is you're going to do the same thing with your work repo. So all of your Chris Pine stuff is going to be on its own branch. And from here forward, you're going to create an orphan branch that, Pine. And then the Agile Ruby book is what you'll do going forward. And so you'll create a separate branch for each task. That's why I'm going through all this rigmarole. All right? So now I'm going to do git checkout B master. Let's look at DevDocs. I do this so infrequently, and I've sort of conditioned myself. Orphan branch. Let's see. Git branch. Orphan. Come on, I'm not getting so old that you can't do an orphan branch anymore, is it? Come on.
I've never done one.
Oh, come on. Oh, it will only let you do it with a checkout, apparently. Okay, so I'm doing it right. Git checkout B orphan. That's funny that it won't let you do that from the thing. So I'm actually doing this perfectly correct. This is why I should never doubt myself, because I never make mistakes. All right. So I'm going to say git checkout B master orphan, and it's going to vomit at me. What did I do wrong? Option orphan requires a value. Oh, maybe
Orphan requires master.
Orphan new branch. Okay. Git checkout B orphan.
Or is orphan gonna...
Yeah, because otherwise, well, yeah, it says or there. Let's do git checkout orphan master. All right, so I've switched to a new branch master. And you'll see suddenly now I've got a little red star here. And if I run git status, it's going to say I'm on this initial commit, and it wants to recommit all my old work. But I don't want to do any of that stuff. So what I'm going to do is git rm cached. I think I could say dot. Okay, there's all of our 523 ones. 524, what? Oh, RM, yeah, RMR. I would have done all of that in the first place, wouldn't it have, Tyrone? All right. So now if I do git status, it's on the point of wanting to make an initial commit, and now I've got all these things back to untracked file status, which is fine because I don't want to track them, so I can say RM, RF, 0523, and RM, do the F just out of force of habit, 524, okay? All right, now if I do git status again, now I'm at the point where I'm at an initial commit. So even though I'm in the same repository, right, master doesn't know about any of the work on my other branches. So now I can do, well, I don't think I want to do much of anything. I'm going to use this spot to create, oh, but
The name of the branch is master, right?
well, that's not the thing. I want to do my Rails app here.
Yep.
That's okay. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to just do this, and then I'm going to rework it slightly. as you'll see. Okay, so let's just create a Rails app before the damn class is over and it's Wednesday. All right, so you'll do gem install Rails. I'm not going to do this. I did this last night so that everything was set up. So you install Rails like a gem. Now, some gems that we install, like Sinatra, it's just a bunch of source code, and we use a require statement, and then we get Sinatra to it. Rails is a few different things. Okay? It is both. Okay, so the Rails gem is both source code, right? When we install that gem, we are installing all of the Rails source code. It's the same basic idea as when you go to Drupal.org and download Drupal, or go to WordPress.org and download WordPress, right? So we get the source code to this, but we also get a command line suite called Rails, okay, which is just like Git in that we can say, right, if I say which Git, tells me user local bin Git, like that. And if I say which Rails, I should see this RB environment shims Rails. And if I want to, if you haven't explored RBNV, we can do RBNV which Rails. And that will go further and actually tell us that I'm using Rails in my 2.4.1 copy of Ruby. Okay? We can ask the Rails command what version it is. This should say 5.1.1, right? So that's the latest and greatest Rails. Tyrone? Oh, sure. Oh, that's going to cause big problems, isn't it? Maybe this is a horrible idea.
I like it. I like it. Master should have everything, I think, and then you can branch off and add stuff to it, and then merge back.
Yeah, but you're going to get weird. You're going to get weird errors from it.
Because your settings out his settings and such.
No, settings have nothing to do with this. I'm trying to understand why I'm merging. You have master, right? You can have your Pine. Once Pine is done, you can merge that back into master. Now you have your Rails branch. We start working on Rails. You merge that into master. Master has everything.
Right.
And then each branch has its individual subsections.
That's right.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I haven't screwed this up too badly yet. So I'm going to do. This is gone way off the rails. I'm sorry.
I like it.
No pun intended. No pun intended. It's gone off the rails. All right. I'm going to check out week 1. I am going to delete this new ill-conceived of master branch. Okay. Okay. Now we've got master, which knows about our most recent thing. Okay. Maybe push this thing. Everything's up to date. Okay. No harm done. This is the great thing about Git. You can make all the horrible life choices you want, and as long as you don't push to it and screw things up, you're fine. Right. Well, and I won't even have to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do git rm rf, get an F, 0523, 0524, and test file. Okay. Right? So now I'm going to say git commit m, clearing out week 1 work. This is going to be a long one, so let's just do git commit. Clearing week 1 work, C week 1 branch. Okay? So I'm going to preserve all that stuff over there. So if you want to go back to the week 1 stuff, you don't have to go back through master's history. It's just on that week 1 branch. Just like that. Okay. Save it. Close it. Everything's deleted. All right. So now I'm going to push it up, and there's now this big, empty, gaping hole where there used to be files and stuff. But that's okay. We're going to fill it with Rails.
We should blow up the history too, right?
No, because this you'll be able to just pull down. When you pull down this commit, it will delete all of your stuff on master.
Right. But the history will still be there. The log will
Right. Yeah. So this orphan branch nonsense, ignore it.
We want to preserve the log, but not
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do was just start fresh from Rails, but it doesn't. This is better because it's not going to cause weird merge conflicts. Because if you try to pull from the master of my demos and suddenly none of the commits it knew about previously are there, you're going to get all kinds of warnings from Git, and it's going to freak out.
So, like, we can just create a branch called Rails, right?
You could. Yeah, but I want to try to have as frictionless an experience for students in this class as possible. Okay, one more time. I swear to God, one of these, before the semester's over, I'm going to show you Rails. All right. Coffee is officially gone, too. What's that? Oh, yeah, right. Summer course. All right. So, if I say Rails, can you give me some help? Okay. Rails will give you, and in fact, the thing we want the most right here is the Rails new command, which creates a new Rails application with a default directory structure and configuration at the path you specify. Okay? So, I'm going to say Rails new, and I'm going to create an app, and I'm going to call it Blurber. Okay? Right? You've got books. You've bought books before, and there's always some famous author like, this will be the greatest thing in the world. Actually, screw it. I'll save Blurber for another time. We'll do Rails new fancy blog. Okay. We'll just do a fancy blog. That will be our first thing, so we can do the traditional Rails blog demo, right? So all I have to do is say Rails new fancy blog, and then boom, this thing is going to start running. We're going to get this notice about this TZ info data, which will be used only on Windows platforms if necessary. Okay, so we've got 16 gem file dependencies, 70 gems now installed, right? So even though we talk about Rails as though it's a monolith, it is actually a collection of a lot of other stuff. 70 whole dependencies here. All right. And it's done a couple of setup tests for us. Now, if I just type my list command, I will see that Rails has created a new directory for me called fancy blog. Okay. Now, ordinarily, when I create a Rails app, usually my Git repository is inside of this directory with my app. Okay. Now I'm going to have an interstitial directory, which I suppose actually works okay because now you can actually see the output of that command. However, if we go inside of fancy blog now, we have to check some things. This is a new thing that Rails is doing. Rails is, yes, it's initializing a new Git repository. Okay, it's also giving you a Git ignore file too. Okay, so ordinarily what I would do is I would just want to make a commit and say fresh, brand new Rails repository. But now with these multiple Git repositories, I don't know what is going to listen when I say Git status. Right? Okay, it looks like my outer one is, but so long as this other little one lives in here that Rails created, I need to get rid of it. So you probably will not have to do this, but if you do, where you go back up a level, right? We've got a .git directory here. That's where your repository actually lives in Git. We need to go into fancy blog, and we are going to obliterate the .git directory in there. Okay? And I guess there's no harm in having the git ignore file live inside of the Rails directory. If we wanted to, we could move this thing up a level, and it will be true for the whole thing, but I think we'll be okay here. All right, so here's what I'm going to do now. So remember, I've run 2 commands so far. Okay, I ran somewhere back here, Rails new fancy blog, and then I ran rmrf.git inside of there. So now I'm going to make a commit to mark exactly this stuff. So I'm going to say Control-C. I'm going to say, all right, so let's, one more time. Here's all these new files. They're right here. If I go back, it will tell me that that fancy blog directory is new. So I'm going to say git add dot. So it's going to add all of those files that I created by running the Rails new command. And now I'm going to say git commit -m. Nope, just git commit. Yes. Can you hold on to that question? I'm trying to stay on track here. Hold on to it. Okay, so create fresh Rails 5.1.1 app. I always like to start with my Rails version number when I create this initial commit, so that if I come back to a Rails app I haven't touched in a while, yes, I could dig into my gem file and see what version of Rails I'm using, but this is a nice reminder for me. And now I will say, ran the following commands. First, I ran Rails new fancy blog, and then I did cd fancy blog, and then I did rmrf.git. And actually here I'm going to say removed the Git repository that Rails created automatically. Okay? So now I have a record in here, and notice for the Rails new fancy blog, I copied that right from my command line. I, by rights, should probably do this for these two things as well. But now I've got a record in this commit of, here's what we did, that's our subject line, and then here are the commands that we ran in order for this thing to become what it is. Okay? So now I can close this. All right. So let's take a tour of what we created. Okay, so I'm in my fancy blog app. And if I just type a simple ls, let's do lsl. So I've got these gem files and this readme and this rake file and all of that. We'll look at those in turn. But the important thing to know is that the second you create a new Rails app, you actually have all of the workings of an actual web app. We can say from this point, Rails server, and it's telling us that it's booting into this thing called Puma. We've got Rails 5.1.1 application starting in development on localhost 3000. We get more startup options if we want it, but all I have to do now is to go to localhost 3000, and I get my, yay, you're on Rails. Okay? And it's reporting to me my Rails version, which is 5.1.1, as which we expected, and it's reporting to me my Ruby version, which of course, care of RB environment, 2.4.1, which is exactly, again, what we would expect. Okay? Now, this isn't very interesting, but it is a web application, right? It's accepting responses, and importantly, if I look at where I started this Rails server, I'm getting logs, right? Started get for 127.0.0.1, which of course that is the IP address of your personal computer, all of you. If you go to my office over in Siegel Hall, there's a bumper sticker on my door that says there's no place like 127.0.0.1. Wizard of Oz reference. Okay. And now it said started get. Where have we seen get before? And which one in particular? HTTP, right? Right? So that's our get variable. We want slash, the resources at slash, right? This was the same thing that we were writing in Sinatra last week. Okay? Now, there's the time of the request. Now we're getting processing by Rails, : welcome controller, hash index. Tell me what all this stuff is. Okay. Probably. Could be a class as well, but it's at least a module, right? And then it has something inside of it called welcome controller, which we would expect to be a class, right? And index is a what? Yeah, it's a method, right? So again, even though we're now getting into the weird things of Rails and the web and all of that, the stuff we've learned about Ruby so far is still true, okay? Now, all of this, where this stuff is, how we change it so that when we deploy our web application and somebody goes to our fancy new domain name that they don't get, welcome to Rails. That's what, of course, the next 4 to 5 weeks are about, right? Okay. So we can see it's rendering. Okay, we've got this Rail ties 5.1 live Rail templates Rails welcome index.html.erb. And now it's rendered that thing. It's passed down, and we've got completed 200 OK, which of course 200 OK, that's one of our many HTTP status codes. Okay, it means they found it. Versus if we did something like 3000/magic, not so magic. No route matches get magic. Okay, so Rails is not magic. We've proved it conclusively here. And if we look at this, oh man, right? So we can see started get magic for 127.0.0.1. Action controller, routing error, no route matches, get magic. So we can actually see the full stack trace here of everything that went wrong. Okay. But the basic pattern where we have some route getting matched to some controller is something we'll see a lot. Although this is the case, we only see this routing error class when there's a routing error. Okay? And that tells us that we don't have any matching routes. Okay? When we get this page, that's always, you'll be so sad. You'll be working really hard and you'll get this big, bloody banner of death where it's just like, it doesn't exist. Okay? Okay. So if I kill that, I can do my long list here. So we can go through this stuff kind of piece by piece. And here I'm showing the one hidden file, which is our getignore file. So if I do cat getignore, right, we can see that Rails is configured to ignore certain files, meaning that it will not try to commit these things to your repository. Here's where I'm going to get to your question, okay? So the first is to ignore any bundler configuration file that we have, okay? And usually we ignore things that we don't need to run our app or that would be personal to us, right? If I have a bundle configuration file, Dean does not need to know about it. He can run bundler however he wants, okay? Now, this says ignore the default SQLite database, okay, which happens to be a database called SQLite 3. SQLite 3 is a dependency of Rails, okay? So you will have to install that if you don't have it on your system already. I think macOS has it. Linux might even have it by default. Otherwise, it's just whatever your package manager is, install SQLite 3. Okay? SQLite databases are what are known as embedded or flat file databases. There's no connection information. It's not like MySQL where you have to say, oh, my database is listening on this IP address and this socket, and here's my username and password. It's just a database that sits there and listens for SQL queries. No security. Not usually good for production work, but as a development database where we can actually create database tables, we can create records and read them and update them and delete them, SQLite 3 is perfect, okay? But we don't actually want to commit any of those databases to our repository. So by default, we ignore any of those files in the database directory, okay? We ignore all of our log files and temp files, okay? So we don't want nothing from the log directory, nothing from the temp directory. However, there are these two files called log.keep and temp.keep. Does anybody know what a .keep file is?
Quick question, Declan.
Oh, sure.
When you're working in a group, wouldn't you want to put the database up so that everyone has the same database?
You'd think so, but no, you don't. Because usually when you're doing stuff in development, you're not working with world-ready data. You're just working with sample data. We will do a thing called seeds. Database seeds, so you will have a file called db seeds, and inside of that we'll have a sample of starter data. So what you'll do is when you start working on the project, you'll just recreate your database from this seed data, and then you can do whatever you want. So that you'll share, but the actual database file you don't want to share back and forth. Okay?
So our application will take care of creating and generating tables then?
Yes. I'm so excited to get at that stuff because that's where all of this crap that we've been doing starts to feel like it's paying off versus right now it's like, well, I guess we know where you're leading us, Stally. I don't know what the hell. Okay. .keep files. This is just a little Git convention. By default, Git will not save any directories that you create unless it contains at least one file. So .keep is basically saying we want there to be a log directory, but don't actually save anything in it. So you'll see .keep files all over the place in Rails, right? They're directories that need to be there, right? If we tried to write to a directory at log, but that directory didn't exist, we would probably get some deeper stack trace in Rails. That would be a problem. So this says make sure that there is a log directory there, but don't save anything but this keep file, which is enough to keep it around. All right? These are two new things from Rails 5.1. Having to do with node modules and yarn. We'll worry about that more when we get to the asset pipeline. And then we've got this bybug history file. We don't need to worry about hanging on to that either. Okay? All right. So that's our getignore file. We have a gem file. if I do cat gem file, okay, first thing is it tells us where to go look for our Ruby gems. So the first line of every gem file is usually source, and then we give it the URL for rubygems.org. What is this? Git source, GitHub, do repo name. Repo name, yep, it's a block, right? So there's some method somewhere in here, git source, and we're going to go and set the repo name, unless repo include, blah, 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 all right? Okay, so that's a shorthand so that we can refer to, and we'll see if there's any actually in here, where you can actually point a gem source at GitHub instead of Ruby gem. So if you're using some edge version of a gem that you need to point at GitHub, this will give you a nice shorthand API where you can say git source and you just pass in the repo name. All right, cool. All right, so here's gem Rails. We're saying we want to use 5.1.1. There's this interesting little squiggle and alligator. I was going to wait until Wednesday or until tomorrow to explain that. So let's take it on faith right now. Okay. There's SQLite 3. That's our database for Active Record. Puma as the app server. Okay, and there's some other cool stuff that we can rack up and set up with Puma, but we'll get to that. We're going to use SCSS for style sheets, which is our sassy CSS. Okay, you can tell how unsassy I am by my herky-jerky trying to be sassy. Okay, so there's Sass Rails. There's that same little squiggle and greater than sign, right? We're going to use Uglifier as a compressor for JavaScript assets. Okay. There's a slightly different thing. Now that looks like greater than or equal to. Okay, so we'll have to see this, and then we're going to say they're going to use this Ruby, or we've got a commented outline for this Ruby Racer runtime. Okay. All right, we're going to use CoffeeScript for .coffee files. We've got turbo links. We've got all the rest of the semester. So all of the things that we need for this, right, out of the package. Okay, if we want to use Redis, we can do that. It's commented out by default. Active model has secure passwords. So if we want to get in the password storage business, which I'm going to urge you throughout this class, do not. Okay, we can install this bcrypt gem, which of course provides some kind of a secure hash so that you can allow people to have a password. There's Capistrano for deployment. Right here we get an interesting little thing called group development. And now suddenly we get this other syntax, group development and test do, which of course, here comes another block. And we're going to say bybug anywhere in the code to stop execution and get a debugger console. Okay, so bybug is going to let us jump in and help things, so we'll want to look at how to work that. Capybara for system testing and Selenium drivers. So that's Capybara, that's a testing framework that we can use for integration testing. All right. Then down here we've got a development tool. So we've got a web console gem, a listen gem, a spring gem. And notice that some of these things, like little spring here, we're not even specifying any kind of version information after it. So it'll be interesting to see how this works. And then finally at the bottom we say Windows does not include time and zone info files. Right? Why would it? It's Windows. Who cares about a time zone? So if in the case of any of these platforms, we'll bundle the time zone info data gem. Right? So that's that. If we look at the gem file lock, we'll see it's much longer in terms of the sheer number of things that are there, but these are all of the things that we actually install when we install Rails. Okay? The gem file is the higher order thing that says, hey, we need Rails, or we need Action Cable, or we need whatever these things are. The gemfile.lock is the thing that actually specifies all of the versions of these things. Okay, and again, we're seeing more of these squiggles and things like that. So tomorrow we'll talk about specifically what those things are. All right, and this says bundled with 1.14.6, so that means that's the version of bundler that we were running at the moment that this thing was run. Okay, we have a README file. I wonder what's in there, all 374 bytes of that. Okay. So this README would normally document whatever steps are necessary to get the application up and running, and then this gives us some suggestions of what we might want to cover. All right. And then we got that nice star, ... whatever we want. All right. We have a rake file. If we do cat rake file, oops. All right, so we see Rails application load tasks down here at the very last line. So again, what do we think Rails is? It could be a class, could be a module, but here we're calling a particular method on that. All right. Or probably, yeah, this is even more complex than that because we've got the application instance and then the load tasks method off of that thing, right? That's right. Right. So for example, we can find out all the routes in our application by running rake routes. This is going to be very short, okay? We don't have any routes defined. Yeah, it's a brand new application, all right? But eventually we'll be able to find out what all these things are, all right? So yeah, rake is a task runner. All right, I'm going to skip app because that's actually where we're going to spend most of our time. We have a bin directory where we would put binaries. If we want to here, well, let's just do this. We can do tree. So we can see all of the contents inside of these things. So that's our app. So, and we'll read about this. This is actually part of the reading this week is chapter 18. A lot of times you won't be spending much time in the bin directory. Config, we'll spend some time in here. Here's where we configure our application, how it boots up. We've got these YAML files for setting up action cable and for setting up our database configuration if it gets more advanced than our little boring embedded SQLite 3 database. We've got environment files, development, production, and test. So this is one of the things I love about Rails that you don't get in a lot of frameworks. It is aware that things are slightly different on your laptop than they are on a production server someplace. So we get these environments baked in, and then we get these nice initializers that are set up, and we'll spend some time in there. Inflections is one of my favorite things in the world. All right. We've got these locales, so we've got the possibility to do localization on UI and things like that. So if we wanted to add a German locale, we could do de.yml. Okay. We've got our Puma set up. We've got our routes set up. We're going to spend a lot of time in routes. Here we've got a configuration file for our rack. Here we've got our database directory, and there's that seeds.rb file I was talking about. So rather than passing the database around, we'll just have some seeds in there. We've got a lib directory where we can put assets. So for example, if we wanted to do a knuckle dragging version of including like React.js, we could put a copy of React in this lib assets. Although actually I think there's a vendor assets. There's a vendor directory. So lib is actually stuff we've written ourselves that we might want to reuse. But again, in this class with the number of weeks we got left, the odds of us working in this lib directory are probably pretty slim. We'll be mostly spending our time in app. Ooh, we have this nice public directory with 404.html, 422, 500. We've got some icons and even a robot.txt file. We have a test directory where we have a whole bunch of things for what we'll see over and over again, controllers and models, but we've also got things for mailers. All right. We have a temp directory, which of course we're not going to save anything from that. And then this is that vendor directory down there. Now, the place where we are going to spend most of our time is back up here in the app directory, which actually let's go into app. Okay, so we talk about model, view, controller architecture, right? So guess what? There's a directory for models, there's a directory for views, and a directory for controllers. We have our assets directory, so all of our CSS and JavaScript and images and things will go in there. Channels, which is a new thing that I won't bore you with right now. Controllers is the things that I don't want to dig into that. I just want to do the tour, show something cool. All right. Helpers, we can create helper methods that will do currency formatting and all kinds of different things. We have jobs that are things that can run independently of our app. So if we have hourly or nightly things that we want to do, we'll find that. Okay. Models using controllers will be the primary things we'll be doing. Okay, so let's actually see our fancy blog app. All right, let's create a fancy blog post. Now, if we are doing a blog as our app, which I hope all of you come up with something far more creative than a blog, what is the minimum viable product that we have to have in order for something to be a blogging app? Okay, you've got to have text. Okay, so what is the atomic, like when we talk about somebody has a blog, what is the sort of atomic unit of a blog? Okay, a post, right? if you don't have a series of posts, or even one post, right, you can't really call yourself a blog. You might have a list about your friends, the music you last listened to, or whatever, what your mood is today. If you don't have a post, right, if we're being very orthodox about this, if you don't have a post, you're not really making a blog, right? Okay, so we have to be able to talk about posts somehow. What do we have to have in order for something to be considered a post? Okay, we need a title for it, right? How I'm feeling today. Or we need a title. Okay, we need a body, right? We need to actually have the post body. Do we need anything else?
Everything else is not required.
Right.
You can get fancy like a timestamp and a signature or
Email or whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
What the author's name is,
Yep.
all that stuff, right? Yeah, so this is our MVP here. This is our minimum viable product. So we need a post, and it needs to have a title and a body. So now, we will use, we do Rails help again. Now that we're inside of an app, it's going to give us slightly different responses when we ask for help. So it says the most common Rails commands are Rails generate new code, and we get a shortcut alias of G. We can run a console called Rails C. We can run a server, which we've already done. Okay, we can run our tests. We can run a console for our database if we want to. Or again, here's Rails new, although we would not want to create a new app inside of our existing app, just like that. All right? So we could dig through all this stuff, or I will just tell you what we're going to do here is we're going to do Rails generate scaffold. And let me ask for help on Rails generate scaffold. Oop. How about Rails okay. Oh, look at this. Rails generate scaffold post string. See, all you have to do is talk in Rails presence of what you need, and it will automatically no. Okay, this is such a common my first app thing. So we're going to pretty much use this exact thing here. We won't go all fancy with this published Boolean, right? We're just going to assume if something has been posted to our thing, it's published. So we're going to run a command, Rails generate scaffold. The scaffold's name is going to be post. It is going to have a title whose data type is string, and it's going to have a body whose data type is text.
what is a scaffold?
All right, well, let's find out. Okay, because we've got everything under Git control. We've got a nice clean repository. We can run this or any command we want. If we screw things up, we can always get out. All right? So we'll do Rails generate scaffold post, title string, body text. We hit return. That's the appropriate response, right? Geez. Okay, so here's what all it has done. So it's running via the Spring preloader and process. And here we've got a number that's probably unique to my operating system. It's invoking something called active record. It's creating a directory, migrate, and then 2017-0530. Okay, so that's a timestamp. Create posts.rb. So whatever's in there, we're going to hope it's Ruby code, right? We're creating an app models post.rb file, so that looks like a post model to me. We're invoking test unit, so it's created a couple of test files for us. It's got a resourceful route here that's invoking, so it's added this route resources posts. All right, yeah, we've got so much to learn. All right, it's going to scaffold a controller for us and create a posts controller. Now, the thing I want to point out here that I love so much, right, we invoke the singular on the command line. Rails generates scaffold for post. But Rails, in its wisdom, knows that certain things, like the model, should be singular, but other things, like this migration, should be plural. Create posts. We have this posts controller. Okay? App views posts. All right? We've got index, edit, show, new, and then underscore form, right? All we gave it, the only thing it knows about is that when it gets this scaffold command invoked, that we're going to give it the name of something. So if we were doing baseball cards, we could do Rails generate scaffold card, and then we could do something like name, string, stats, whatever we wanted to do with it. So it knows about the scaffold part, and then it knows a certain number of data types like string and text like that. Okay, everything else is completely up to us. So there's no law that says if you're creating a blog that you have to call the title, but hard to come up with a better word than title, right? So we'll just use title there. Same thing with body. Yeah, you could probably twist something out, post text or something, but this works real well. So again, simplicity in naming things is going to reward you. All right, we have this JBuilder thing, which is part and parcel of the new, or some of the new things that we've gotten in Rails 5 that we'll learn about. We've got a post test down here, and now we've got some JavaScript files called post.coffee. So that's a compiled form of JavaScript that we can write if we want. There's our posts.css file or SCSS file, and then down here we've got a apps asset style sheet scaffolds.css file. So we'll want to dig through all of that stuff as well. All right, looking at this in terms of what Git sees, if we do git status, this is interesting, right? So it's created a whole bunch of stuff. We know that because it's all listed down here in our untracked files, right? But it's modified an existing file. So let's run git diff on config routes RB. What did you do, Rails? Why, I added resources posts. Now tell me, people who have been looking at Ruby nonstop for a week, what do we think resources is and what do we think posts is? Okay. Yes, and it's happening inside of a what? And inside of what inside of a Rails file? Yeah. Draw, do, resources post, and then this is a long-winded comment, and then end. Okay.
Now what that means.
Now what it means, but again, if you can start even with this basic vocab and say that we have particular kinds of things that we can understand and we can talk about, then we can know that we're talking about some kind of block. And of course, this is Rails application, routes, draw them, do, and we've got this resources post thing here. Okay? All right, everything else, brand new code, so Git is not going to help us so much. But before I do anything else, I'm going to want to commit this. So let me, again, grab the exact command that I ran. Yes, I could type it again, but invariably, knowing my fat fingers, I'll make a spelling error or something here. And of course, Rails doesn't care if we spell title or anything else wrong. It'll complain if we start coming up with our own data types here, but in terms of this actual thing. So I want to save exactly the command that I ran. All right, so let's do, whoops. So we'll do git add dot, do git status again, see what we've got. Okay, cool. Git commit. Create post scaffold. There we go, just like that, okay? So now we've saved inside of our commit message exactly the command that we ran, okay? All right. Oops, I need to close that. There we go. All right, push this one up. Now, what do I have if I run Rails server? Has anything changed? Let me do that rake routes thing, right? We saw that routes file had changed. What if we run rake routes now? Ooh, look at this. Okay. Now we've got a prefix. We've got a verb. Get, post, get, patch, put, delete. We've seen these things before. And now we've got a URI pattern, /posts. We have this interesting .format thing in parentheses. Posts new. There's posts with some kind of ID, right? And then down here we have controller #action, right? We would expect some type of controller class, and then here's some action we can do on it. So there's a posts controller someplace, and we have these actions: index, create, new, edit, show, update, and destroy. Okay, bye TK. Okay.
And it knows this because these are common use cases of these patterns, right? Of the HTTP
Okay,
URL
so
patterns, or does it know about the blog example and it's only able to do it?
No. So Rails, one of the cornerstone philosophies of Rails is convention over configuration. Meaning that if we have something that we're modeling like post, you're probably going to have a bunch of them. So there should be some URLs that have posts in them. And that you probably want to have a nice, short, memorable URL like this. Now, if the blog is all we're doing here, we can rewrite the routes so that when you go to just get /, it will go to posts index. Okay? But the conventional / expected / principle of least surprise is that we're going to want this conventional thing. Okay?
So here it assumes that we're going to need all these methods.
Right. Because again, we like to create, read, update, and delete them. Okay? And we'll see all of these things sort of lining up on one of those letters or another. Okay? So I get all bold and say, well, hey, I guess if we've got this route, what happens if I run Rails server and I try to go to /posts? Let's see. Is it that magical? Active record migration, pending migration error. Okay? So it's telling to resolve this issue, run bin Rails, db migrate Rails environment development. Okay, we don't even have to go that religious about it. But we've got to run this migration. But if I remember correctly, that was one of the files I saw. So before we run anything, let's go check out the db directory. Okay, and then here we get our whole huge blown stack trace. Whew. Right, we've got to actually create this. So if I go to the db directory, right?
How did you know we're in development right now and not anything else?
That's part of the magic. Okay, so if we don't, okay, so we've got something called development.sqlite3 sitting here, which is a good sign. But let's go into this migrate directory. Right, and I've got this date stamped. It's not a Unix timestamp, right? We can see 27:05:30, so this has just been truncated together. But create posts.rb. So let's go ahead and open that thing. Let's go atom 2017. There we go. So we open up this migration. Look at this. This is so great. So we have a class called create posts, which is subclassed from what? Active record migration. Okay. And yeah, we've got some syntax we haven't seen before there. We've got this 5.1 sitting up there. We have this, what, on the next line? Line 2? What are we defining here? And what is change? Yeah, it's a method. We're creating a class called createPost. We're specifying a method on it called change. And we're saying what? Create table posts. What do you bet that does? Yeah, it creates a table called posts. Not necessarily a SQL table. All we're saying is create this thing called posts. Whether it's SQLite3, whether it's MySQL, Postgres, Redis, NoSQL, CouchDB, MongoDB, whatever it is, we're just saying do Rails what you know to do with whatever database you're working with to create a table called posts. And of course here we're opening a block. Create posts do T, all right? And we want to say T string, right? So T must be the type of column we're expecting, right? We know this from our basic database theory. Right? What's a database, or how is it usually represented? Right? We'll have usually some kind of ID. We'll have something called title. We'll have something called body on here, right? And these columns are expected to have some kind of type to them, right? In this case, we said that string is what we want on title, and we want text on body, okay? And then down here, Tarun, we have T timestamps, okay, which is going to be a nice magical little thing. So what this migration is going to do is it's going to create a table that is called posts, and the records in there are going to have a title, which is a type string, body, which is a type text, and it looks like it's going to maybe give us some timestamps too. Now, usually in more complex migrations, we will have an up method and a down method. All right? Which means that to set up this database, you should do this thing. To tear down this database, you should do this. This change method allows us to do both. So if we run this migration, we love it, fine, we never touch it again. But if we decide, oh, this migration was a huge mistake, we can actually revert or roll back our migrations. It will then destroy a table called posts, right? So again, we get all of this stuff for free just as a simple method here, okay?
What library does it know the access, or if it would be able to create a SQLite one, or a Redis one, or
that's all part of, that's how Active Record Migration talks to Active Record, and then that has to do with how we've configured our databases. Let's see if we can jump into, I think that's 15 minutes, 14 minutes. If we go back here to, let's go into our config directory. Okay, database.yaml. Let's just take a lucky guess here and look at database.yaml. Okay. All right, so it says ensure the SQLite3 gem is defined in your gem file. Okay, so we have something called default and default, where this ampersand default, which is a what? Placeholder for a block. Okay, and here we're saying we want an adapter SQLite3. Here's our pool. Okay, so we're going to grab some environment variable here called Rails max threads. Okay, and we've got a timeout of 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds. So then, for our development environment, we're just saying to build off of, right? We've seen this operator before. Build off of whatever you specify in default. And here specifically, we want our database to be in db/development SQLite3, which, if you recall, if I do l.db, there it is. Okay. Probably created that when I tried to start the Rails server, but it hadn't run that migration, right? Because it's 0 bytes, so there's nothing in there right now. Okay. Then we have a test database down here. So when we run our first round of tests, we will get the test SQLite3 database. And of course, that usually gets torn down and deleted after the tests have run. And then finally down here, we have our production database, which is expecting production SQLite3. Now, if we're using Postgres or something in production, all we have to do is modify this line to say, here's the new configuration information for what you should use on our production server. We can keep using SQLite3 in development here if we want. Same thing with our tests. It doesn't care. So this is the information that it's using to figure out how to make those connections. Okay? Right. Yeah. There usually are gems for different databases that you have to use. All right? But we're way ahead of ourselves in terms of worrying about production stuff. But it's good to understand like how all of these things connect together. So if I run my rake command with capital T as a flag, it will tell me all of my different tasks that can be run. And we'll see there's a whole bunch of rake DB tasks that we can run. And amongst them is rake DB migrate, which is to migrate the database. Okay. Here's our DB rollback, which will roll the schema back to the previous version. So that's where that change method comes in. And we've got all these other things. We'll use rake DB seed later, all this stuff. Okay. For today, let's do rake DB migrate. All right. Create table posts. It did it in very little time. Okay. Create posts, migrate it. Here we go. And now I can see from how I've got my command line set up, I've got my little red star, so something has changed here. So if I run git status, all right, it's made a change to DB schema RB. So let's back it out here and let's have a look at, whoops, fancy blog DB. Okay, so if I do git status, git diff, oh, it's just created that. It's a brand new file. Okay, that's cool. So I'm a curious person. What's in schema.rb? Okay, there's a lot of comments. I love a lot of comments. So we're told this file is auto-generated from the current state of the database. Instead of editing this file, please use the migrations feature of Active Record. Okay. All right. Now, this is an important note. This is going to get into what we're talking about next week. But note that the schema RB definition is the authoritative source for your database schema. Okay? So everything that Rails knows about our database, what tables it has, right? Do we know this? Do we need to talk about this real quick? I assume most of you have database knowledge. When we have a database system, right, if that's represented by this huge circle, we don't actually store information in a database. We store information in tables. in a database, right? There's nothing that we write to a database itself. And of course, you don't really store data in a table. You store it in a row, and you don't really store it in a row. You store it in a column, right? Okay. So, but this is the authoritative thing. And so here we go. Title, body, and here's our timestamps. Created at. There's our date, time, and updated at. So we're going to get that for free when the record was created, when it was taken down. Okay. We'll also see that we have this version here, and if you go back and compare it, we'll see that that number is the exact same thing as the timestamp that we got on our migration when we ran that scaffold. Okay. So what did I run? I ran rake db migrate, and again, I'm going to be religious about this. So I will do git commit, well, first git add, and git commit again. Run first migration for post. We're generally, you only run migrations in development. You don't run migrations in production. You'll run a different command, which is db setup, which basically reads that schema file and creates your database solely based on what's in that schema file. Okay. As we start mucking with our databases and creating different migrations, right? If we decide suddenly, hey, no, we really do need a mood column on our posts, we'll write a migration that says add mood to posts, and then we'll have to write all that stuff. So, but generally, the migration is usually only run in development, so you don't have to do that whole religious ceremony where you're specifying the environment. Unless you've done something exotic on your setup, you shouldn't have that anyway. Okay? So there we go, rake db migrate. I'm not going to stop saying that those are the commands I ran. I'm just going to assume that if I wrote that in there, that's what happened. Okay? So we can close that. We can go back here. All right, we've got a nice clean slate. So let's try it again. Rails server. I'm going to just have to alias that. For some reason, I'm not hitting the S anymore. Rails server. Okay, here we go. So here was my sad pending migration error on posts. Now I'll hit return. Posts. And now I can say I would like to create a new post. Thank you, Rails, for having that right there. Title. Look at this. My first post. Woo. All right, let's blow this up. Right? That's a input type in our HTML. Single line of input. Here is my first post. I am so happy. There is even multi-line content here. Woo. All right. Here's our button to create post. And again, all we did is create that little scaffold. We're getting all of this stuff. So we say create post. We get a note that this post was successfully created. There's our title. Here's our body. And now we can either edit it. Okay. Now, let's note what's happened up here. We've got localhost 3000 posts 1. Remember where we expected to be able to put in a unique ID? Okay. Oops. If I go back to edit this thing, now I'm back at this screen, and of course I blew up my... Will you just reload this for me, please? Well, we can actually see this. So if we... How about an update? Okay, there's our update. And if we go back to our console, oh my God, there's all kinds of colored output here. Look at this. Okay, so where did we go? Here was when we first fired it up. So we went to get posts. And what did it do? Select posts from posts, right? Oh my God, right? It's doing SQL queries for us, okay? And then it's telling us it rendered posts index.html.erb within layouts application. Okay, now here's where I said I want to create a new post, so it went and got this new URL, posts new, processed post controller new. Then here we've got that new herb that's being rendered, underscore form. Okay. All right. So then once we created that, we do a post to post, right? So far we've only seen GET requests. So when I actually submit and say, here, create this post, it's creating a post request, which is what we expect when you have data that you're sending to the server. Boom. Point that thing at posts. Now it says it's processing post controller create is HTML. Here are the parameters. We have these authenticity tokens, which is a really interesting security feature in Rails that we'll get to eventually. And then here's our little payload of data. There's my post. Okay, and what is this? This is not just gobbledygook. What is this in Ruby? Yeah, it's a hash, right? UTF-8. There's a check mark, which is kind of awesome because you actually have to support UTF-8 in order to render that check mark. We have this token, and then here we've got a post hash, which is itself a hash. There's the title part. There's the actual contents, and then here's the body part and the body's contents, and then finally here's the commit type we're making, which is to create post. All right. Then we see this begin transaction. So now here is our SQL query. Insert into the post table, title, body, created at, update at, and then these values. What kind of a construction is this for SQL? No, we're deliberately not injecting, right? You can't do an SQL injection attack on Ruby, which is to say, we can't say for the name of body is drop star, right? Right? Do we know the little Bobby Tables joke? XKCD Bobby Tables. Okay. Hi, this is your son's school. We're having some computer trouble. Oh dear, did he break something? Did you really name your son Robert Drop Table Students? Oh yes, little Bobby Tables we call him. Well, we've lost this year's students' records. I hope you're happy, and I hope you've learned to sanitize your database. All right? So this is what's known as an SQL injection attack, whereas we're expecting people to be nice and say, oh, what title do you want for your post? Somebody comes in here and then actually injects SQL to this. What we can't do that won't happen in Rails because we're creating a syntax here that's known as a prepared statement, meaning this is all the part where you can expect anything that references anything about the table, right, or our database generally. And then here, these are the values that we're going to stick into it, okay? Yes. Okay? And then here is where we've got some arrays here now, right? Or arrays, an array of hashes, thank you. Okay, so title, my first post, body, here's my first post, and now here we're doing the timestamps for created at and updated at. Here's where we actually write to the database, and now we're being redirected to this brand new URL for whatever the post is at ID 1. All right, then we get this 302 response that it found it for the first time. Okay, and here's where we're actually requesting this new URL now. Go and find that. We're saying the parameters is we want the record of ID 1. So here's our SQL statement. Select posts.star from posts, where post ID is equal to something, limit something, and so specifically we're saying ID 1, and we're limiting 1, right? If we're searching by unique ID, there had better be only 1. Okay, so by putting a limit in there, we make that more effective, or I should say Rails does, because that's how it's working by default. Then we render these show views. Then here's where we render the edit view. Okay, then when I updated it, let's see, we went back and forth a couple times. There's where we edit it again. Here we go. Okay, so now we're saying the patch verb. So when I update it, we're going to not say post. We're going to say patch. We should go and double check that. This does adhere to spec, so it's correct. All right. So patch posts 1. Okay, so it's going to edit this, and so we see the brand new SQL here. And now we've got a slightly different prepared statement for something that's different. Okay? And then we can go back, get that thing again.
Both of them apply, but put is update/replace, patch is update/modify.
Yeah, which would make more sense, right? If we're just changing a couple of parts of a record, that patch would be the verb that we're looking for.
For replacing this completely new or everything
Yep.
could change?
Yes. One more thing I want to show you before we go, and that's as much fun as it is to poke at a Rails app through a browser like that, Rails gives you a console. All right? And it looks exactly like Herb, except now we have our actual application. So if I want to find out all my posts, I can say @posts equals post.all. Select star from posts, right? And it found exactly 1, and then I can start asking it things like, hey, how many posts do I have? Okay. 1. I think we can do post length, and it won't. We'll talk about the database every time. Okay. And we can do at posts each do post, and we can do puts post title end. Okay. Yeah, I forgot. Post that each if I put it there. Let's try it one more time. Even though I'm a minute over. Puts post that title. There we go. My first post. Okay. And what gets returned? Our record set for the instance that we called it. So this is where we're going. So we'll talk more about MVC on Wednesday. We'll start getting into object relational mapping and how awesome that is to be able to say things like post.title and get our title attribute or our title record. All right? Yay. Get out and enjoy the nice day. Hopefully it's still sunny out. It looks kind of clouded over. All right. Yes, I'm going to, and specifically I want you to do your work on the master branch or on a dev branch, but then do checkouts for task A, keep it in a branch, task B when you finish that. I'm going to write all that stuff up and I'll talk about it explicitly tomorrow. And if I don't remind me, so I will almost certainly. Okay.
Can you input the PowerScript, please?
Yeah. So is there something we can start working on today or no?
You could start reading in the Rails book if you want to.
Also start kind of with ideas for the Alpha project. See you tomorrow.
Yes, see you tomorrow.
I'm glad to hear that Rails automatically sanitizes it, because I'm starting to get a little nervous with the security of Ruby on Rails.
It does too much. That's like convention over configuration.
Right. And that is the thing. I mean, you can always, you don't have to live with any particular thing that it does. You can always go against the convention and then do your own thing with it.
So just kind of broke it up like you suggested, and I guess just to make sure. Went through all the examples and coded them up, right? That was part of the work, right? Okay. Yep. And then 3 exercises total.
Yep.
So is that kind of the, you said we're going to be doing something differently for the Rails exercises?
With that, I want you to follow through there's an example app that you developed over the course of the book. And so I'll ask you to do a dev branch where you do your work and do task branches. So it's written out like task A, task B, task C. So when you're done with task B, you'll just check out a branch of task B, and then that'll just be preserved for you there on the thing. Thank you so much.
Before you keep moving forward? And then so you want us to work on the dev and then merge dev back into master and then, or just work on master and then branch off tasks, or? I
feel like I want everyone to get on the habit of working off devs.
I like that, yeah, that's what I like.
And then you can rebase or probably just merge your work back into master.
Do we have to call it dev, or can we call it something that makes more sense to us?
Something that makes sense. As long as it's clear you call it working, you'd rather call it a working branch, that's fine with me too. I'll write all this up this afternoon.
Okay.
Since it's clear that you're very eager to get started on it.
Yeah, I'd like to, because this took me all weekend and it took a long time, so I just want to get started as soon as possible.
Sure.
So basically, but we'll be following along and working on this app that's in the book, right?
Yes.
And and then in addition to that, the project as well, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And I think you only have to do like task A and D this week. So you have to start racing through the whole book in 1 week.
Okay.
Okay.
Like the first one.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
For the SME project, do you have any update on that?
I need to start a thread, and you can start a thread if you want to. Okay. For people to figure out what ones they want to do, and then I see where else.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So you want me to just start a thread on what?
On Basecamp, yeah. Like you can do like 513 SME modules or something like that, or.
Okay.
Or I'll just let me do it.
Yeah, because I can put something up there as a
I'll
reminder.
Put something. Don't worry.
But because I don't know what to do. I mean, I've started reading a little bit on Active Record and Action Cable.
Yeah. Which one of those did you want to do?
I was thinking Active Record.
Okay.
That seems.
It's a big one.
It's a big one, and it seems like
you'd like it.
It's going to be the most useful to. It's going to be the most used one, right? Are we going to be using anything else?